Okay.
All right, we gotta do our mic checks, and then we'll be good to start the episode. So, yeah, you guys get. I'll let you guys can hear it too, probably. Advanced audio properties. All right, you test your mic.
Check. Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
Yep. Okay, try from right there. Just try talking.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Looking. Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
There, right there. Test. 1 2. Perfect. Great.
Good, Alan?
Yep.
Okay, welcome to the Generation Yap, where the goal of the game is to make you a thinking man and woman. That's what we're all about. So today we're going to talk a little bit about relationships, marriage. The whole plan of this podcast is get you thinking big first, and then start dialing things in. As far as we'll start going into more depth on each of the subjects as we get further along in the podcast. So hopefully it builds on previous podcasts with maybe some rando stuff, just because, gee whiz, let's look at how this person was thinking, because it's amazing.
Episode.
Yep, episode number 4. So, can you share enough where I can see our talking points?
Yeah. Here, I'll just switch your monitor so you can just see this one. I think that'd be better.
I don't need to see that. You can put it over the center as long as I can see where my head is. We should be good. Go to the right a little bit.
Here, I can split screen this. Boom. All right.
There we go. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so we're gonna be talking about.
He's interviewing me this time. This is scary.
Yeah, kind of, somewhat. So, okay, Alan, you graduated high school early.
Class of 23. Crazy.
Every year that you don't have to be in school, and I'm a supporter of education, building knowledge, but every year you graduate, that's earning potential that you can make before you're 18 to set you on a higher priority. So again, education-wise, you should be looking to graduate from school as early as possible. But
unless you want to be a lawyer, or
unless you want to be a lawyer.
If you plan on going to college, this is my perspective. Some of my classmates used to ask, like, "Should I graduate early?" I'm like, "Do you have any? Are you unsure of, or are you going to go to college?" They're like, "I don't know yet." Then I'm like, stack up as many college classes as possible because they're like $300 each instead of like
where you can start building income. If you graduated 2 years early at the age of 16 and you can land a job that pays $35,000-$40,000 a year starting out, and you live very frugally for those 2 years, you can,
especially if you're with mom and dad.
Yeah, if you can live with mom and dad, even better.
You can get 50 grand in the bank.
Yeah, you could have 50 grand in the bank by the time you're 15. I mean, by the time you're 18. Sorry, by the time you're 15.
It's either if you're going crazy, in theory, as law. I've never done this. I wish I could have. So if you got a down payment on a house at 18, once you got some credit rolling, so let's say 19, then you could have a few roommates
in your life. So again, it's perspectives, what you want, what sacrifices you're willing to make.
Or what I would do, I would invest it in books and education and into my active income ability. So I don't mean college. I mean things that apply to, for me, entrepreneurship. So it might be paying for some things that you get done to get some feedback, doing some free work for people, building a website, whatever you're doing.
Earning enough money to start your own business.
Yeah.
So we get to that. So now Alan's 18 and he's starting to look for a woman. So Alan, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a traditional woman who, I say, stays at home, takes care of the kids while you're the main bread earner, or are you looking for a gal who wants to be a professional career? What's your thoughts on how you would like your family to be structured?
There's 2 thought processes I've had in the past or currently, which is if I met someone who had if they were very like entrepreneurial spirit like me, then I would be like, let's tag team this, let's build it together, and then obviously get a business rolling before we had kids, and then have it run itself to enough to where you could just build some good memories for them. Or it depends on the desire of who I met, right? So if they wanted to be an at-home mom, then I would try to build my life in a way that I could support that, and then have a good environment either way for kids along the way. But I do want to have kids and stuff, get married young. That's a desire of mine. So, but I would probably prefer the traditional one. So my great grandma, or not my great grandma, my grandma Joanna, her and Kenny got married when they were 19 or 20, I think, around there. So very young, and she just kind of lived at home before that, and she cooked and she did a lot of things, and just my grandpa had a pretty good life just with homemade food, just all that different stuff. Like, it just seems like a great life to have.
So
And it's not about the food; it's just
it was the
how
fact
they work together well.
She helped him because she knew they had the same mindset and goals of where they wanted to be in life, what they wanted to accomplish, and she understood her role in helping her husband, in this case, build a successful business or be successful, for the simple fact he never had to worry if he was gone of having to pay bills or take care of or take care of the kids or make sure the kids were taken care of. He could come home and relax for a few minutes and then engage with the kids and his wife.
Yeah.
That is that the kind of relationship you're looking for?
I would say so, just because of the benefits I've seen compared to other stuff I've seen people try. I've just seen just like the stories my dad tells and the memories they have growing up. Just, it seems like the life lessons. You talk about that too.
Yeah.
You talked about that with your testimony, just the memories you have as a kid with mom and dad always being around, and the hearts of your children are with the parents instead of with some institution. So I'd probably, so that's kind of what I think about in terms of, also just like from a slightly selfish perspective, it'd be great just to come home to a nice place, where you're not, both people aren't tired. You come home to people who look forward to having you there and that kind of thing. So
yeah. And they appreciate you for the contributions and sacrifices you make for your family. And at the same time, you appreciate your wife for the contributions and sacrifices she makes for the family, whether it's keeping the bills. I mean, depending on what the financial situation is, whoever's better with the finances, that kind of stuff. But
and as far as I understand, like equality and equity, like our culture wants everything to be the same in parallel and whatever. But I would see it as like equally, God purposely made Eve out of the rib, right? Like to be equally yoked. Like you're pulling the same amount of weight. It's just you're doing it in different ways.
Yeah.
So,
and so it sounds to me like you would rather have your wife instill the values that you think are appropriate versus shipping your kids off to a daycare center. And for some people, that's the only way they can get by, and I get it. But it sounds to me like your priority is making sure your kids are raised very family orientated.
Well, when I lived in Colorado, I met some really nice homeschool families, and just the way the kids lived and the way they carried themselves and the memories they had, and then the way they could use their time. Like they all knew instruments, they all knew all these things. One of them had a side hustle. One of them taught, piano lessons all day, probably making good money. Right? They were just ahead of the game. And they just loved their siblings. I've seen so many siblings that all they do is pick on each other, but they just loved each other. So it's just like, and I honestly just hated school. I just did not like school. In terms of, I would sit there all day. And
what was your thought process as? Because school is obviously education is important. We should always be curious. We should always be constantly wanting to learn new stuff because that always helps expand. It expands our skill sets. But as far as like a school academic setting, why did you not feel, maybe versus basics, it's great, but this is kind of what I envision.
I would say sitting in school, I just remember being 10, 11, whatever. You just got to think about kids and human nature. In what setting both glorifies God, matches human nature to like, you're learning in a way you want to learn instead of just sitting there counting it in your head. So, I would want to go outside, want to whatever. So I would fidget a lot, or I would, and instead of being able to use that energy, it'd be slap a bunch of homework on the table, don't give you enough time to do it, and then you get home, you have to work on homework for another hour or two, and it's just school and paper just became your entire life as a kid, and it just felt miserable, and you did everything you could to not do it, meaning you fought the system instead of using it to grow. So honestly, because of the lessons that taught me, I don't know if I would have wanted to be homeschooled, but I think in terms of future generations of the Johnson family, I would want them to be homeschooled, because there's a lot of friends I met in school. There's a lot of, since I lived so far in the country, I just think I would have been kind of lonely most days. But I think if, like, the perfect environment for me, like in Cedar Falls here, right?
Yeah.
There's some acreages that are great where you have your town or your city. Let me pull up our drawing board here. So this one over here. Okay. So, let's say you have your town. There's a few towns, Evansdale, Waterloo, whatever. And then I know some acreages that are right about here. And then you have your busy road that runs through town. So I would want to live right around here. So you're off the busy road, but you're near the place of business and economy. Especially since I'm doing an internet business, that's my goal. So I'll be very flexible. So that way, like, the kids, obviously, once they're trusted, could ride down the sidewalk and go to a friend's house. Or, there's a park right here, for example. This is just a random town.
Yep.
Or people could come to us, because I know a lot of kids, I think especially the next generation, a lot of kids will be raised not in the right way at all. So just in that perspective, I would want to, I've heard stories, like you told stories when kids would go to your house.
Yep.
And it would blow their mind. So for sake of mentoring, I would want to kind of live in a great in-between where, so let me just make new, don't save. So let's say, this could be anywhere, right? Let's say you have your big city, and then that goes into what? A suburb. And then you have, then there's, like, I would just say your village setting where it's just kind of sparse houses here and there. And then you have your acreages all within a few miles. I would want to be right about here or right about here, where obviously I have space.
Like 3 to 4 miles outside of town, basically.
I would say within a mile.
Okay.
Because then, you can't drive till you're 16 or whatever most states.
Yeah.
So it's like, so any kids that God would grace me with can go here for all the benefits of this, but they're not stuck in here where there's just no room to think. So that's kind of where I would want to be in terms of a homeschooling group or whatever, just strategically on a geographic level. I've thought about that a lot. So,
and I will tell you from my experience, it's amazing from night and day. It's 100% amazing night and day of seeing the difference between somebody who's been taught in a traditional school and somebody who has been taught in a homeschool. One, they're very much more self-starters. They don't wait for anybody to teach them. They know what they have to get accomplished, and as soon as they get accomplished, then the rest of the day is theirs, which is kind of the benefit. But
what's the goal of the school system when you really think about it? They teach you how to do more school, to do more school, to do more school, to eventually just get a job. What about for entrepreneurial guys like me? What about people that want to go out and solve problems? You're sitting there and you're ADHD or you're blah, 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 all these different things. I know that's a real thing, but I'm saying I see all these, they just put labels on you. They put you in special programs. Like I think until like 3rd or 4th grade, I was in a special program with one of the teachers because I just couldn't sit still. Even though at home, I'd be watching science documentaries and self-educating myself in a different way, even though I couldn't write straight. So it's just like, instead of taking the approach of Sunday school or whatever program where you have one person that the kid most likely won't respect because it's just some random lady from whoever that they don't know, from Jim from John, I would say their parents, their kin, and oh wait, I need to get this. Here we go. Their kin, their dad, their mom, and then to do it in concentric circles where you have the parents and the kids, and then the kids and with their parents in groups. So like a society, like a church, being raised in the church. Because I think when you look at history, as far as I understand it, I don't have many sources behind this, I've just heard this in a lot of sermons, is most, like Indian tribes and stuff, it was a taboo to be around a lot of youth unless you were practicing underneath like a more experienced person, right? So just I think the model of one teacher who is underpaid and doesn't care about their job with 30 kids who are rucking around, I just don't think it's smart versus.
So you're saying the parents can more individually teach the kids, and then they
I
can
think the
see when
job
the
of it,
kids they can see when the kids are fidgety and go, "Hey, go run around for 10 minutes."
I just think the job of educating, and I don't think it has to be in an academic way, should be in a way that the parents are mostly involved.
Yep.
And then you obviously, but I would say, let's say I had a homeschooling group that you start in community, because I think that's pretty possible. Go to a large, let's say you went to a Colorado Springs, right? There's plenty of places to live, and you go start a Facebook group, you get 10 families, and say, all right, I think all the parents could self-fund a carpentry day for let's say all the boys want to do a carpentry class. You hire a carpenter who goes to your local church, or maybe he just does it for free because it's for the kids, and just say, hey, here's how you build a dog cage. Here's how you build a kennel, or here's how you build a raised garden. Here's how you build a table, things like that. And just fund experts to teach the kids the things and have those be the teachers. I would want my kids to learn from the best. So like if I didn't know something as a dad, instead of me being like, well, I either figure it out with the kids, which would be a fun experience, or I would try to bring them to someone, because I've been mentored since I was saved, and that's been so valuable. Being around experienced people, I would try to create an environment where, let's say I had like 2 daughters, 2 sons. Let's say one of the daughters was interested in finance. Then I would say, hey, here's a CPA. Why don't you go work for him for free for a few days? See what he does, right?
See if you enjoy what you think you actually enjoy.
You just got to think from a kid's perspective as an adult.
Yep.
And I'm like right in between, because I'm not, I'm just on my feet as an adult, like just starting. It's been a year and a half.
By law, you're an adult.
Yeah, but
by all means. And you're acting like one. I'll give you that,
But I still remember high school, right? I'm not like 40 where I've seen so many parents who just look at kids. There's a poem in How to Win Friends and Influence People that he's like, it's one of those rare poems that in the newspaper just hit the streets and people loved it. And it's called like Father Forget Me Not or something. It just talked about from a kid's perspective, this dad who just had regret that he yelled at his son. And I just think that's why I think Jesus loves the children so much, because you got to think from an innocent kid's perspective. They just want to learn, they just want to play, they just want to have fun.
Look at kids, they're naturally curious.
So make it curious. If it's not worth being curious about, maybe it's not worth teaching.
Exactly.
So that's how I view education. And the way I build my life around that is obviously you need a lot of time. It's a sacrifice. It's a good sacrifice.
So you're willing to sacrifice a double income for what you perceive on the backside will produce a better quality citizen and produce a better, more well-balanced child.
Well, what I love about entrepreneurship, this is an interesting perspective, is what if instead of all the kids are just gardening just to garden, what if they sold canned goods? Yeah. Right? So then you can support your family, teach them how to create opportunities for themselves.
Exactly.
And say, you want that bicycle, you got to go buy it. And then you give your kid a goal and a challenge. And then you don't want to be one of those parents that say, you need to get a job to buy the car, but you need a car to get to the job. So now you can't buy a car. Like they just create these paradoxes and create rules that just make reality harder for their kids. I would try to set up in such a way that here's this hard goal. Here's something you can work towards, especially for guys, it's just like, let's solve a problem, let's do it, and break it down in a way where it's like, you want to buy this, whatever age they're at, right? And just set up feedback loops, because I think education all comes down to feedback.
And is it really worth the other question is do you really need that item, or is it a want?
Yeah, and the average desire lasts 20 minutes.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And so I like the idea of the parents going, okay.
And that gets more into community building at that rate, because.
Well, sure, because then he's going to talk to his friends about, oh, I'm canning jam because, I like cooking. Maybe the kid likes cooking and making jellies and jams. So they're making jellies and jams. They're earning a little bit of money. They're learning work ethic without being forced to learn work ethic, because you're giving them a plan and you're trying to help them succeed. And then you can do the cost analysis, which then teaches them financial skills at a very young age.
And to sum it all up, I would say I would educate with an end goal in a way that creates feedback loops.
Yeah.
Because without feedback, I think intelligence is a choice. Can you tilt your mic just a little bit
Sure.
away from me? I keep catching it.
Okay.
Um,
Is that better?
I think we're good. Yeah. Still catching my voice a little bit.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out why. Okay.
Test. 1, 2. Sorry, sweet.
Okay, good. We're good again.
And I think intelligence is a choice because if you're a 5-year-old kid and you see the stove, like, ooh, that looks pretty. Psh, right? And then you never touch the stove again. You are 3 times as smarter than some kid that walks up to it 3 times in a row, and then doesn't learn. So instead of all the self-worth voodoo, this is quoting Alex Ramosi in one of his most popular videos. This like really changed my view on people and business. And business is just people. Every deal you make is people. Every person you hire is people. Every sale you make is with people. So you learn a lot about just how people tick, and I love it. I've read all sorts of books on it, and it just came down to feedback creates a world where intelligence and learning, creating opportunities for yourself is a decision instead of a circumstantial thing. And the first thing is getting over yourself. So, and that's why I love the biblical qualities, teaching humility. So,
Absolutely.
And I think the biggest thing that was hard for me in high school is people around me. I won't say anyone, but like sometimes people I just see in general don't let their kids make mistakes, and they overprotect. So I don't want to be a helicopter parent. If I see my kid doing something that won't kill them and might like scratch their knee, I might let them fall the first time. I might warn them the first time, and then the next time say, hey, if you do that again, you're going to hurt yourself. And then this sounds harsh, but I might just let reality, I might let gravity teach them a lesson. Hey, you're not ready to ride your bike without training wheels yet.
And really, honestly, there's nothing wrong with, there's studies showing that the greatest growth of human beings comes from actual failure
and stress.
Stress.
Yeah. So
now you don't want that constant by all means, but it's okay when you're in a tough time in your life to go through a little bit of stress. There's nothing wrong with that, because if you take the time to get the feedback, what's gonna end up happening? You're gonna end up growing as an individual, because hopefully you've got a good group of friends. When you're making dumb mistakes, they're gonna let you know. But again, you got to be careful with those friends that you pick, because if those friends are people that don't want to accomplish anything in your life, then they're just telling you can't do it for the sake of you can't do it, not, hey, you're doing it, but let's make it a little bit easier. If you do this will help you and take away stress.
And instead of letting the rewarding things be the bad things, where, for example, what's the common one? Hey, Timmy, you've been on your tablet too long. Go do this hard thing that you don't want to do and isn't rewarding to you at all. That's what the kid hears. So I would want the rewarding things to be the things that they need to do. So that would go down to guarding their inputs, which biblically, guarding their heart. Yep. So I would say, instead of giving them all this sugar, give them fruit, because then the fruit will taste better, because their brain doesn't know, what like this. So it's like, I saw a family who, for dessert, they gave their kids fruit. So then they would rush to eat all this protein and then eat the fruit. And they just like ate good the entire time, and they didn't reward them with anything that would hurt their health. So, and instead of video games by themselves, where they're online with a bunch of Call of Duty boys who are cussing up a storm, video games with mom and dad, video games with, obviously within reason, and obviously let kids play them by themselves, because sometimes you need to play by yourself. But I would just say, like, create reward and pain structures that are aligned with what the kid wants, what God wants, and what the parent wants. You hit all three of those, you can almost teach or get your kid in the right way to do the right things in the way they want to. Because if you can create an environment where they think it's their idea and they think it's what they need to do and what they want to do, instead of telling them directly, it's just a path they discover. Yep. Making it a path of discovery and adventure, Yeah, so that comes with imagination. And I love a graph. I should turn on this again. This was by Phil Hopper, I think on his kids series. This is probably a year or two ago I saw this. and it was just like this exponential graph, and it basically said like 18, and this was like exposure, and then this was like innocence. And I love this, where you slowly expose your kid to the world systematically based on their maturity, right? Which comes to the parents having a good gauge on reality, which the Bible says the fear of the Lord is being of wisdom. So I think all the, so whoever I date, whoever I, would marry and trust with everything and all that, because you need trust absolutely in that, to build a home. You would, I would want them to really fear the Lord, and I also need to get over my pride and fear the Lord. I need to trust God more. So
Yeah. And I can kind of piggyback on what you were saying there as far as the kids learning, and kids do learn different. Like as a young kid, I was a hard worker from Jump Street. I mean, 6 years old, I was a hard worker. When I was in the military and we had to PCS, and my son said, "Hey, I want to stay behind." And my wife was like, "No, absolutely not." He was ready to stay behind on his own. Where
you just know, right?
Where my other son, a little bit, just a few years behind him, there was no way I would let him stay behind because his maturity level wasn't there. We all blossom at different times in our life. Not everybody hits. Not there are what they call late bloomers. I was a late bloomer when it came to quite a few things, but as
some people, this is going to sound harsh. Some people are slightly dumber or slightly less experienced in certain areas than others. Like we're wired certain ways.
Different, and that's okay because there's their own strengths to those kind of people, but it was based off of the decisions they were making, and when you had when I had conversations with my boys, my oldest one, he was very mature for his age. My youngest one, he was a little bit below. I'm not knocking them; they're still both great men. It just took Charlie a little bit longer, and there's nothing wrong with that. But because if you push them when they're not ready, then you're setting them up to fail.
And who wants to do that? First thing I would try to teach my kids from a very young age, even at like 1, 2, 3, 4, during those formative years, is patience.
Yeah.
To understand that some things are going to take 2 years, some things are going to take 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And I want to give kids need a reason behind everything. If parents just give the petty, I don't think I would ever want to give my kids an excuse they couldn't understand.
Because I said so is not the
just leveraging authority. Or the worst one that I've seen and had done was "I love you." You completely destroy the word for the kid, right? And it completely devalues our culture, devalues everything. If you want to bring value back to our culture with language and things, I think you need to really use language properly and to be a man of few words. And that comes down to your own spiritual growth and your own, because your kids don't see you at your best moments. They're going to see you most of the time at your worst moments. And when they see dad blowing up, or when they see mom yelling at the dad or dad yelling at the mom, that's what they really remember, right? Yeah. So obviously they remember dad on stage and stuff, but they mostly remember him when he's in the kitchen and he's pissed that the bacon isn't done yet, or whatever's going on. Just
whatever the deal is.
Whatever the deal is.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It can be something very trivial. And
you need to be a man of prayer. Absolutely.
Well, and I agree with the man of few words. We should be observing more than we should be talking. We should be talking when we have something. We should be talking when we are speaking the truth, and we should be talking when we have something important to add, but not talking for just the sake of talking. Well, everybody else is making a comment. I have to comment too. No, you're better off, especially if you have nothing to say and you're just kind of winging it and it's not well thought out. You're better off sitting back, observing, and learning from the people that are saying things, and then because that also leads into the choice of your friends. Because if you got a friend that's spouting a lot of nonsense, um, and stuff that is not well thought out, or it can create issues
And I would want to
in your
home,
life.
and I might even go as far as someday. Obviously, those are decisions I have to think through, but it's like I think there's a lot of merit in the old days where don't speak unless spoken to, those kind of things. Like, obviously that's harsh, but in our culture, but you got to really think, why would they do it? And it's just like, think about the amount of respect those kids would have had if they could honestly understand why. Like, dad comes home and mom says that they disrespected them. Like, they knew that they disrespected that man's wife. They knew that they had messed up. And are they going to do it again? Absolutely not. Compared to never punishing kids. So obviously, I've seen both examples done way too bad. I think just like everything in the Bible, I think we serve a God duality biblically. So, like my mom always talks about grace and truth. That'd be right in the line. I think the narrow path is the perfect balance between, um, like I always say, you have the left side, the right side, whether politically or whatever, anything.
On anything.
Yeah, where it's like, for example,
You got the left side, you got the right side, you got God's biblical word. You might be able to go a little bit right or a little bit left, but you should not be to the extremes. You should be narrow is the way, and we shouldn't be straying. We shouldn't be straying from the path.
I mean, you can do something as simple as like sharpening an axe. A simple example. You make it so razor sharp, the blade will just break.
Yeah.
Because it's too narrow. If you make it dull, then you just have a hammer. So, well, you need somewhere in between, which is neither of these options, but you combine them. So it's like you
The
get
best of both worlds.
best of both worlds. I think if you can do that with your kids, which is being stern enough to say you don't do that, but also humble enough to say, hey, I might have been a little harsh there.
Yeah.
And you kneel down, you hug your kid and say, I'm sorry. They will remember that and they will respect you and they will forgive you because kids have open hearts. But as soon as you burn them too many times, they're going to go look elsewhere. They're going to look to the world. That's when you have a real problem and you get rebels. So as far as I understand,
And you
I watched a lot of this happen in public school.
You brought up the most beautiful point right there. As parents, we make mistakes. Don't be so stuck on your pride that I'm the parent that you don't take the time to apologize to your kids when you've done something wrong. Because you were quick to anger versus being peaceful in the heart. Having a loving heart. And it's amazing because even in my military career, it was just amazing. We'd have supervisors that would just come in there and scream and yell. It's effective initially, okay, because people are scared crazy. But then
that's something.
Yeah,
I'm guessing it took 2.5 weeks, and then everyone just didn't hear him.
Yep.
Because it takes about 2 to 3 weeks, as far as I understand psychology, to get used to any environment, and good or bad. And I bet after a while, they're yelling.
Yeah. And then it was Sergeant so-and-so. Sergeant so-and-so was on the warpath. But think what he was teaching all those junior NCOs. When things don't go right, scream. No, when things don't go right, we evaluate why they don't go right, and then we have a talk with our people, our kids, and we talk in a normal sound voice and go, hey, I need you to think about this. You made this choice, and this was the result of your choice. Your choice was bad thinking. Here's why. And then you have a discussion about it, of why it was bad, and that can be from a biblical sense. And you don't have to raise your voice. And the amazing thing is, I found it more effective to go, I know the quality of people I have, and I'm really disappointed in the quality of the product you produced.
And I also think in terms of
and that's
kids,
more effective.
Yeah, I also think with kids in general, like setting, this is such an important thing. I remember hearing stories, or I'm sure this happened to me at least once as a kid, where you get yelled at, you will get in trouble, whatever, and there's just no way for the kid to redeem it. I think you always need, just like God provides us a way out of any temptation, I think that the parents need to provide their kids a way to remedy what they've done, even if it's something very extreme, because just kind of sitting in their own guilt as a kid leads to crazy solutions like cutting or whatever, because they're just stressed, they're bottling it up, And I've seen kids literally destroy themselves because dad's not proud. Not, don't leverage your authority. The worst thing you can do to a kid is when they look up at you and say, dad's not proud, mom's not proud, they don't love me because I didn't do what's right. You caused a legalist. You know,
Yeah, you must follow the law. Well, that's why Christ came along, right?
yeah.
Was because nobody can uphold the law. Nobody's perfect. So we have to realize our kids, and we should be teaching our kids from even their failures, but doing it in a loving, caring way. That's the way we should be teaching our kids that, hey, yes, I'm disappointed, but I still love you. But let's not let this happen again.
Some of my greatest memories were you did this bad thing, but if you fix this, let's go get ice cream tonight, or something like that. Where it's like there's just this mercy or this like reward at the end of it that I don't deserve, but it's just like dad took me under the wing and was like, you know, I still love you, I still whatever because
I'm disappointed in you, but I still love you.
Like we're gonna remember this, and obviously you might be gone for a week, but like tonight let's watch a movie or whatever, just to like get their mind off of it.
Yeah.
But also to remind them that it doesn't destroy the core relationship.
I can tell an interesting story. I heard it a couple weeks ago. So Donald Trump Jr. in his younger days, the president was going to be out of town. Well, he wasn't the president at the time, but it was when Donald Trump was a young man. Donald Trump Jr. was a young man. Dad was out of town. He's like, "Can I have a few friends over?" And dad was like, "Yes." And so he invites 200 of his closest friends. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine how it went. Well,
were they in high school?
No, I think it might. I didn't get an age time, but I was guessing it was kind of like 21, maybe like 21 to 25 type time frame. Is kind
adult body, not adult mind.
Kind of situation. And President Trump came home. Granted, he was a businessman at that time. And he goes, what the hell is going on here? I said, you could have 4 or 5 people. Everybody get out. And he goes, and his son, for the next 3 days, completely cleaned everything. And you know what? After that, he goes, my dad never brought it up again. Because one, he realized his dad knew he screwed up. He knew he screwed up by his actions because he was trying to make it right by cleaning.
That's the key. As soon as the kid knows that they screwed up, you don't need to push it further.
You don't need to pound it over their head. Remember that time I said you could have a few friends over and you invited 200?
Guilt tripping kills people.
Yep, guilt tripping. Yep, exactly. Remember that time? Now, if you're using it because they're still making the same mistake, hey, remember how you recovered from this last time? Why are we still making these same choices? If I say you can have 4 or 5, limit to 4 or 5. I've worked hard to create this beautiful place for you to be able to have your friends. Please respect it. All I'm asking is you show me a little respect as your father. I didn't say you couldn't do it. I'm just saying, when you say 4 or 5, I expect 4 or 5. Or you need to be honest and say, hey, I want to have 200 of my not so closest friends over. Be truthful in the conversation with your father, because I guarantee you, if you said I'm going to have 200 people over, he's going to be like, probably not the great thing to do, son, because these usually get out of hand, especially if there's alcohol involved. And the next thing you know, my place is trashed and I'm out thousands of dollars, and our relationship is bad because of it. We don't want that. So if you say 4 or 5 friends, make it 4 or 5 friends. Cool. But he never brought it up again. And I thought that tied in very well to your point of don't hold it over their head forever.
I think it comes down to if your kid knew what he needed to do and actually had the strength to do it, he could live on his own already.
Yep.
Right.
But you should also be having those conversations as they're growing up and saying, hey, at some point in your life, your friends may pressure you to have a big party. It's not worth it. here's how these big parties go. Everybody gets too drunk. They have too much to drink. Next thing you know, you got maybe a sexual assault happening, that kind of stuff. If you're not living a balanced life.
Always have a story for the young kid.
Yep.
The kids love stories. I worked in kids ministry.
Yep.
As soon as you made a story, they would perk up. Whoa, story time?
Yeah.
So.
But you're also teaching them at the same time. What's the point of the story? The point is the easiest way not to make the mistake is learn from people of the past and go, how'd this work out for other teenagers that had 200 people over? I remember when I was going to high school, we had a girl who they came over and they trashed her so-called friends came over, and it got out of hand in high school, and they trashed the house, and it cost thousands and thousands of dollars of damage to their house. And that wasn't her intention. She didn't intend to go out and do that, but it did happen. So you just talk those situations over that you experience. That's why it's important to have these kind of conversations with the kids. It's to give those life lessons before you have to experience those life lessons. So you already got it filed in your head of, hey, these are mistakes I made as a kid.
And think about the emotion. And let's say a 10-year-old boy, let's say you had this like art piece or this nice painting that someone in your family painted or is from an artist that whatever. Let's just say there's a painting, right? Let's say he threw ketchup at it or something, this kid. And let's say let's say he's 10, 11. He knows he wasn't supposed to.
Yep.
Right? He's not supposed to play in that room, whatever. I come home as a dad. You got to think from the kid's perspective. So if you know that you're a man of short temper, then I would just look at the painting, look at the kid and say, sit over there. I'm going to be back in 5 minutes. And then the kid will be like, oh, okay, this is not great. And then because if you yell at the kid, they're just going to resent you. Yep. But if you come back and you just sit down with him and say, your mom just loves that painting. And just like really explain to them what they actually did and the consequences to people that they love, like how that hurt other people. I think that would
be more effective.
Be way more effective, because it's not just dad doesn't want me to have fun. No, it's like, this hurt your mom, this hurt your sister, this hurt, this was your grandma's painting, whatever. This is a dumb example, but you know what I mean? It's like,
well, say that painting was painted by her grandmother, then it has sentimental value. And you didn't respect enough of you, from a kid's standpoint, they're thinking, oh, I screwed up. And we need to be going from the perspective of, you understand this, how important this was to your mom.
But then you got to watch that you don't say, therefore, guilt trip, balance.
Right. But you got to have that balanced response. So next time when, I don't expect this to be an issue, because you're going to be cognizant of the conversation we had. And you just leave it at that. And then the kid gets about his day. Yeah, they might get grounded for a couple days or maybe a week. But the whole point is,
you got to think in ways of, how will this create a memory?
A memory that, in a positive aspect.
Yeah.
So now we've kind of talked about traditional versus non-traditional and education parts of marriage and what you want. And again, these are all conversations that
and how it leads to the future.
And
so we're not talking about what I want, what she wants. We're talking about how this would be good for
the children,
the things that result in the marriage.
Yep. The benefits of being married, going through life, which is hard enough. If you got the right partner, man, they can lift you up in a heartbeat.
And you got to understand why the Bible calls children a gift. Can you hit down that? Why do you think the Bible calls children a gift? Our culture is like, they're a financial burden, you're busy, blah, blah. Why do you think children are a gift biblically? Why do you think the Bible says that?
Well, my perspective, because they bring you back to, because they haven't been corrupted. That's why children, to me, that's why they haven't been corrupted by man's point of view. My 4-year-old granddaughter, she absolutely loves people. She has no fear of people. Going into Walmart, hey, Daddy, that man, we need to go talk to him. Or we don't know him. I know, but we need to talk to him. Just the wonderment. and kids speak the truth.
Imagine this, right? If the Bible says to pursue wisdom, imagine you had a little boy who his whole life he was guarded in proper reader. Instead of scrolling TikTok, he was raised in theology. I don't think it would be a thing of gaining wisdom. I think it'd be a thing of just maintaining. Yeah. Because and then just getting the foolishness out of his heart. The Bible says foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. But you also got to think how Jesus talks about children. I've never thought about this before. So if that kid was raised in such a way where his innocence was maintained until he could have the strength to guard his own heart and then become a man, then just imagine the perspective he would have by knowing so much truth. When he sees evil, he would flee, right? So it's just, you got to come down to, does this hurt or help?
Yeah. Does it hurt or help?
In a lot of good things, you have a small moment of pain, right? Like that moment that we described with that kid where you sit down, that's going to hurt. That kid's going to feel bad, but it's going to save him years of pain in the future because he understands why he hurt someone.
Yeah.
And if you don't teach that lesson, or remember how I was talking about now or later, and if it's later, just the extreme, they're 60, they never learned that life lesson that their actions have consequences on people. Well, they're going to be in prison. Yeah. They're going to have murdered people, so like, you got to think from the foundational perspective. So, and that's why I think like having a home where parents can properly train children. Yeah. And if I'm, as a young man, seeing what I did and didn't have, my parents raised me extremely well, but there's a few things I missed. Every parent isn't perfect. Yeah. I could take those, just like Paul Washer says, I can climb up to the foothills of Everest, carry my family on my shoulders, and they can start from where I left.
Well, it's that, and plus you're giving them, not only are you giving them healthy mindsets, but you're also teaching them that even in the worst of times, when things are really bad, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And
they have a good father, then they will have a million times more respect and fear of God.
Yes.
Because if you have an awful father, why do people hate God a lot? Because they think of their dad. It's horrible, but it's true sometimes because... Yep. But instead of ignoring that truth or trying to avoid it like a culture does, you can use it and be a good man. That's why I just love that quote, like just what one good man can do. There's a thing you need to listen to. You should too. It's called Holy Ambition. That word came on my mind this last week. I was like, Holy Ambition. I was talking to all my friends about it. Like, where did that come from? And there's this book by Chip Ingram. It's a 6-sermon series. He talks about holy ambition, and the audiobook is crazy. And he just talks about Jeremiah, how faith isn't emotion, faith isn't this or that. It's just you have the ability to see God's agenda and to, even if it doesn't feel great, and it often has cost you your life almost. Like he had to walk into the king and ask him to rebuild his country, right? What one good man can do. So you just got to think from that perspective. For us young men, what would make me a good man? Mentorship, fellowship, reading the word, prayer, if I had to put them in 4 things, and then keeping a clean conscience before the Lord, number 5, which I'd say is one of the most important. It's why you do all those. Then out of that, since I think the Bible calls us to be leaders, like courage, like there's a song called Courageous by Casting Crowns. We were made to be courageous. I just love the lyrics to it. Check it out. Those are 2 resources I came across this week that was just a good reminder. If you had just think about what you could do in the world. And there's also a podcast I listen to called the 5 Generation Theory, sent to me by a guy I know named Forrest Dawkins. And it was like, if 5 generations of people just followed the Lord, and it started with one family, they just raised their kids right, then those kids raised their kids right. Then the 3rd generation, there's so many of them, there's like a little community now, little empire starting to form, that they start, some of them do business, some of them go into council, some of them go into the doctor, some of them, they have enough to where they can almost cover every basic career field. And they just, they made a pact as a family to stay in the same local, same 50-mile radius. And then the 4th generation starts to inherit some of the businesses that were formed, starts to grow better, and then they start creating jobs. And then there's some other families that start working with those families. And by the 5th generation, there could be an entire country won for the Lord by one family raised right.
So this is what I love about this young man right here. That kind of thinking right there. That is world-changing thinking, if you really think about it. Uh, 5 generations, and you can change a community. It takes 5 generations. I mean, that is absolutely, it's breathtaking. And and then the question is, how many are you thinking that far ahead? Person who sees sees the future the furthest and the fastest, they change the world. And that kind of thinking right there, where it's been thought through, and he's listening and he's learning his thought processes, and he's basing it off of biblical scripture. Just absolutely amazing, that kind of thinking coming out of an 18-year-old young man. That kind of thinking is stuff you see out of 25, 30, 35-year-old men. He's looking, he's evaluating, figuring out what he believes. Just absolutely amazing, Alan, and I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, that's great food for thought. And that's the whole goal of this podcast, is to create thinking men. Folks, we got to, the men and women in this country our young men and women in this country are in crisis. They have been filled with so much garbage. Absolute garbage.
And the biggest thing in that book, this is what I listened to yesterday, and this kind of comes from, just like everything, I listened to a lot of smart people this year, 50 books, Christians, some psychiatrists, mostly business people, because that's what I'm doing, business. And the thing they talk about the most is focus and discipline comes from elimination. So we have so much out there, add. You need all these things in your life, but it's more about
simplifying it,
making life simple. Now I get why people order them.
Look at Elon Musk, SpaceX. What is he doing? The best part is no part.
Yeah.
So if you don't need to complicate your life, don't complicate your life. If you don't need if you don't need a car payment, don't have a car payment. Get what I'm saying? The smart man, because he already knows if he buys a brand new car, within 4 years, 40% of the car value of that car is gone from depreciation. So why are you buying a brand new car?
And if you drive it a lot, the chances go up exponentially. Some deer might pop out, especially here in Iowa. Boom, car's gone.
Yep.
So
then you got to make educational things on, do I need stopgap insurance if I'm going to buy a new car because of the depreciation value? Is it worth it? What's the likelihood? But the key is that if we're thinking people and we're engaging, guess what? We're thinking about finances and kingdom dollars and where my dollars are going, and do I want to be house poor and do I want to be car poor? All for keeping up with the Joneses. But we'll kind of get into that just a little bit later. So, Alan, why would you court some girl versus date?
Well, I think a lot of things in the Bible come down to honor, come down to respect. So let's just do the perspective of a worldly example, and I've seen this enough, and you can probably correct me. Since your story, you did it a little bit, the dating way, where you don't take the dad into the consideration. So let's break this down. So let's say I
did how you should not.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to pick at him. It's just he would say it himself.
No, I'll be honest. I just don't want you to repeat my mistakes. They set me back years, wasted years of my life.
So since you did it, break down what the average young guy in the United States does with the young lady, just in terms of dating, how it starts.
Well, I can tell you, like I said, I always knew the Lord I just was not a very good Christian. Let's be front and clear. I wasn't. I came from a broken home, had some childhood trauma, got it. But always knew I wanted to be married, but I never, it wasn't really until, Alan and I started this podcast that I kind of sat back and thought, based off of the conversations we were having, I'm like, if I could turn back the clock, and I had to do it over, and I could save people a lot of time and pain, how would I do that? And
before I guess what I wanted to say, sorry to cut you off, is just like what the two paths look like. So,
Well, yeah. So I didn't. I wasn't. I was not doing biblical, and honestly, I was. If the girl would give me the time of the day, I wasn't thinking past. I wasn't thinking past sins of the flesh. To be quite honest, I'd put no thought into it. I really had not put any thought into it at all. I was just like, well, we'll kind of, as I'm dating, I was kind of figuring it out. Oh, I don't like this in a girl. I don't like that in a girl. But then my question is, and I'm lucky I didn't have a kid. I'm lucky I didn't have 2 or 3 kids by 2 or 3 different baby mamas. That's how wrong my thinking was. Um, but
but how do you get there? So let's just say from the average, let's say you're a 16-year-old kid or you're 14, um, and you're in high school, start noticing girls are prettier than they used to be. They don't have cooties anymore. And you're like, oh, okay, well, our culture says I need to start gaining my independence, blah, 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 because that's all you're taught in school.
Yep.
You would start to
start asking girls out.
You start asking girls out. Then you ask the girl out. You guys get to know each other. And then your teenage brain is thinking of 2 things: hormones, sex, and wow, this person must be perfect because of those things. And the logic department of your brain shuts right off. So as far as I see, so you get to know the person over a few months, and all of a sudden you get this, the average young man, out of pure innocence, maybe even just doesn't know what he's doing. No father, no whatever. Just him and the girl hanging out.
And here's the cautionary tale about that. Okay, anytime you involve any form of intimacy, even holding hands, okay, and I know it sounds crazy, but even holding hands is an act of intimacy. So it is more appropriate in kissing. Kissing will whitewash you from seeing any flaw in a young lady. That, because guess what? You're in love, everything's great, it's perfect. Well, yeah, it's not, because you haven't sat there and you haven't talked to the girl. One, in my case, I didn't even know what I wanted, so that was number one. Number two, you haven't talked to the girl to even see if you're compatible. Oh yeah, you're going to talk about, oh, I like this band, he. Oh, I like Justin Bieber. That was.
It's just the conversations are all surface level.
They're not deep. They're not deep, meaningful conversations that advance your life.
And as Paul Washer says in his Manhood series, What Man Is Not, Part 1 through 3, highly recommend it. It was very formative to me. I found it at 14, like 3 weeks after I had tried to kill myself. Like, God gave me that series about manhood, dating, and just life in general, and where you could grow towards, and just being smart and being cautious with certain things. Because what I've learned with any good tool, like there's a book called It's Good to Be a Man. It says sex is just an engine to grow God's kingdom, because like that 5 generation thing, right? You go, therefore, go multiply, go fill the earth, right? It was meant to be a gift as the couple became one flesh to then bring more godly people into the world. So you have these strong God-given desires, according to Paul Washer, and you're a young man with no discipline, no wisdom, your junk's full of head. Same thing with the young lady.
And not a thinking man or woman.
Yeah. So they're not thinking.
We're thinking about the now.
We're not
thinking the ramifications of our actions.
And they just have desire.
5, 10 years down the road.
They just have desire. And they have this innocent desire, right? There's nothing wrong with desire, or desire and thought. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's as soon as you decide to go do something, then that's when it becomes ethically right or wrong. So then they find themselves in the back of the car. Then they find themselves in the alley. Then they find themselves in the closet alone at school, whatever, during recess. Like, they start having these moments alone because they're around each other all the time. Parents are home. Then the desire takes over. Wives are teenage moms all over. And then what does our culture teach young men? Be macho man, be single, whatever. So then the
sow your oats.
So let's
that
say
that was big in my time.
Yeah,
being promiscuous.
Oy.
And it's all contrary to God.
And you hear Andrew Tate spout off things like with all these different ethics. I've just seen back when I used to have a scrolling issue, he would just say things like, I'll sleep with this person, la da da, but as soon as it's just all these BS ethics.
It's stuff that makes you feel good in the here and now.
will just completely destroy your
but
life.
has a great potential to destroy your life or sidetrack you from what God's intended purpose was. And that's why I say I can tell you everything you did wrong, and you listen to this young man on his thought processes of how you can do it right, and it starts with keeping God first and foremost centered in your life. If you keep God centered in your life, no matter you got a dad that beats the crap out of you, a mom that's a drunk or a druggie, you can accomplish anything because we know from the Bible that, and the Bible's full of parodies of not parodies. That's not the word I'm looking for. Parables. Yes, thank you. Parodies. Parables of bad situations. If you take the right mindset out of a bad situation, good will always result. He can take the worst situation and make it good.
Think about all this crazy stuff in the Bible. This really hit me the other day. This was actually yesterday. I just had a really interesting night listening to this book, and I just had thought through some stuff. It was just a good night of prayer. The more you ask God, just on a side note, the more you ask God to help you pray, the more moments. But I highly recommend this book called Holy Ambition, and it talked about whenever Jesus rebuked or disciplined people in the Bible is because they weren't trying to get to know God with their actions. And that really hit me. Like, that's such a good summary. So why did God give grace to some people but not to others? Why did he punish certain people but not others? It's because one people would want to know God, the other people wouldn't, right? So it's just, you got to think about in a way, this will help you really get ethics down. Because the first book, if I ever write one, would either be the story of last year, just everything that happened, or I would call it A Million Little Things, just being pulled 1,000 ways. Don't lie, don't steal, don't. Like, we're not meant to carry this stuff alone. It's more of the fact of, think about it this way ethically, just for a filter for you young people or anyone out there. I think this will help you. This is what really freed me from a lot of just beating myself up all the time. Like, you saw me, like, this was recent. A few months ago, I came out of this. I was isolating. I was like barely, I would eat just enough. I was not eating great. Like, I was just, every little area of my life was wrong. I finally realized it just comes down to knowing and trusting God. And if that's your decision process, will this allow me to know God more? Will this allow me to honor God more or not? It becomes very clear what you should and should not do, because God says, or listen to a sermon on, I'll be honest.
Do my words and actions honor the Father?
Your whole goal should be to have no space for sin in your life, because any sin that gets in your mind, gets in your heart, is a little bit of a gap between you and your intimacy with God.
So your goal in life is to keep that gap as little as possible. And we're all going to fail. Nobody, there was only one perfect man, and he died for us. So
we're to be I think God made us exponentially growing creatures in terms of knowledge, skill, and ability, and everything besides time, right? Yeah. So if the whole framework, just to break it down at a simple level, quoting all these business people, which I love, they just say, what's the simplest way to do this? The most effective way to do this? If the whole goal is honor and glorify God, then why I would do dating versus courting? Dating, you set up yourself up for failure. You basically practice divorce over and over. I love the example they showed me at Village Creek Bible Camp. They took 2 pieces of duct tape that, were fresh. They stuck them together. They peeled them apart. They stuck them together, peeled them apart. They took a fresh one and they held up a weight with it, and it held up a lot. It dealt with a lot. They could shake it around. But the 2 pieces of tape, they put them both on the other weight. They shook it around. It fell off immediately. Why? Because there's some things that, God redeems things, but in this world, he leaves scars. God leaves scars. Some things can't be redeemed, right? Like, sometime you can't get back because you drank. Sometime, there's certain things that are lost to a person when they do things, especially in the area of sexual sin, because you're only meant to do it with one person for your whole life. Yep. A monogamous heterosexual marriage relationship is what the Bible wants. And if that's the whole goal, then the dating thing, the Tinder thing, having a consumer mindset, who's the most pretty, who's the whatever. Even when you get married, if you just marry the most beautiful woman in the world, give it 5 years, there's gonna be 20 more beautiful women in the world. Like, you'll never have the top. but you can. So you got to think, what will?
Get old, we all die.
Yeah. So
So who do you want to die with sitting next to you? Somebody who's shallow, who doesn't care about you, or somebody who loves you despite all your flaws?
exactly. So the thing with courting is, if God cares about the family, right? He made the family before the church. The church didn't come for a few thousand years until after the family. So if the family's a priority, and my goal is to go start my own family unit, I should probably honor the unit that the lady's already in. And since I'm already, in a way, outside of my family unit, at least maturity, like resource wise, I'm out here, and as a man, I want to go start my own. Then why are so many phrases in the Judeo-Christian world, her hand in marriage, or her, or like in lots of African tribes still do this, but many cultures all over the world would do this, where you'd have a bride price, you'd have a
Dowry.
dowry.
Yep.
So, in poorer parts, it would be a goat. In other areas, and there's a story that you should check out called The Seven Cow Wife. It's pretty interesting. And it just comes down to value. And some of my sister's friends actually came over. They're foreign exchange students, and this is just a very interesting thing. They talked about how if the girl was educated and was a virgin, the dowry would be like way, way higher than if she had just been around and didn't know anything. So it's just interesting when you look at ancient history compared to the last 200 years. There's some merit in ancient history in terms of people did things consistently over a long period of time. When they stopped doing things, cultures would die. And you see, when there was sexual restraint in close family relationships, the culture would last and flourish. As soon as sexual constraint got out, look at Romans 1. They get destroyed. So,
I mean, you see it in the African American community. When I mean, you see it. I think the latest statistics is 75% of African American kids, they have they have no father in their life, and back before that, it used to be 25%. So it's and what is the missing link? There is no father, and it comes down to culture too. The culture, unfortunately, for especially in the inner cities, is women are looked at as a piece of meat versus looked at as a potential bride. Because it's in the songs, and trust me, there's white people. The songs are the same way. But when you think about it, you've watched as the family, the core family has disintegrated, the crime has increased.
So back to the courting thing. The reason I would do it is, so this is my basic view of courting. Not a lot of research, just from what I've heard, what I've listened to, whatever, over a few years is you basically, the families are involved, the parents are involved, and you set up boundaries. Obviously as a couple, but obviously, and then the parents are involved. It depends on the couple. Like some families, if they get along great and they have similar views on things, like they'll be around each other all the time. They'll be at Christmas. They'll be at whatever. But the way I would do it is I would approach the dad and say, after talking to the young lady, making sure it's, I'd probably talk to her, like, let's say a week on the phone. And then I would approach her dad and say, hey, like, I'm doing my best to be a man of God and whatnot. Here's why I think I'm ready. Would you allow me to date your daughter for the sake of marriage, to court your daughter? And then get to know them well, by their,
friends of God, friends that are godly and will, if you step out of line, they're going to call you on your behavior.
Yeah. Just build an environment around that relationship, because we are what our environment really is.
Absolutely.
I can tell you that, moving 3 or 4 times in 2024. So that's why it threw me off so much, because that's why I tell young people, when you move out, the way you are by yourself with like no one around you is what you'll have all the time. So it's whatever you make it. So I tell people, save a lot of money and build your character a lot before you get your first apartment. I didn't do those two things, and I would say honestly, right about now, I'm starting to like.
I think you're being a little bit harder on yourself than you need to be, because, like I said, um, yeah, you made the decision before you're even 18 to move out on your own, um, and I think overall you handled it fairly well. You know, one, you relied on God. Um, and two, you ask questions. You know, I think we had conversations on the farm when you were 16, you know, and you're talking about, oh, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to get my own place, this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, so have you thought about power bill, electric bill, all this good stuff? And you're like, no, well, you need to plan all that out. What about first month, you know? And it wasn't to bring him down, it's just to bring him to the reality of his decision and say all these things need to be accounted for. I need my own apartment. Okay, I've got to furnish that apartment. How am I going to do I have the money to buy new? Okay. Okay, I don't have the money to buy new. Okay, well my
Facebook couch it is, you know.
Yep. But you know what? That's the beautiful thing of thrift stores and that kind of stuff. You can pick up stuff cheap as a young man or a young woman out on their own trying to figure it out.
And let me tell you the advantage of living in a good Christian community. My parents bought me a set of pants. You know, I got like some whiteboard. I got a whiteboard from a friend. I got food here and there from my grandparents. I got like, I have saved so much money because people will give here and there because
Out of just generosity, but also they want to see you succeed in life.
yeah. So again, it's a compounding thing. So I just think with courting, and obviously this is what I understood as a young man. I still believe it. I think to date, this is my opinion, controversial, can't say whatever, I don't care, is I think that you should live on your own as a young man. And truly, it says a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to one wife, and they shall become one flesh. It doesn't say little boy. It doesn't say, well, what is a man? He can probably handle himself. He can probably take care of himself. He can probably survive in his environment. So if that's the case, if you're a 16-year-old kid that doesn't know anything, if you're a 30-year-old kid that doesn't know anything, and you're in mom's basement, you have no business, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I hadn't considered dating until recently because I lived on my own for a year. I've paid off enough ignorance tax to like understand, like, here's at least the basics.
My ignorance tax.
So that's like well, Alex Muzzy talked about is some sale at a company he was watching, and some teacher was like, why should I invest in this company? Because they were selling it and they were whatever. And he was like, this guy on the whiteboard wrote up, it was just such a cool concept. So he wrote up $1 million on the board. And then she said, what do you make a year? And she said, 50,000, right? Whatever, teacher salary. So he's like, the reason you can't invest in this company as it's growing through the charts and whatever is because you don't know, like you're paying $950,000 a year in ignorance tax because you don't understand. Oh, I forgot zero, but yeah, you don't understand, you know, whatever. And that was in the financial sense, but I just love that term about ignorance tax. Like, by you not knowing something, you're hurting your own potential. So it's like, I would say take the time to know it. So that's why I would say, this is my opinion. This is what I would do if I had sons, whatever. Live on your own for a year. Get on your feet. Have a few thousand savings, whatever. And then consider dating. Because you'll just have a little bit of everything under your belt. And like, the first thing I moved out, like you think you know everything, but then you're like, it's like you have to relearn everything, right? I didn't have a shower curtain the first night I was in my apartment. And I got home, I was working for a mutual friend of ours out doing rock work and stuff.
To his defense, I didn't cover, hey, you'll need a shower curtain.
So
that was awesome, Alec.
And it's 9 o'clock at night. So water all over the floor. And because I had to shower. It was like way late, and I had to get up work early the next day. I was like, man, and I had no savings until like 3 months ago. So don't do that. That was scary. But and then I went to a college study group for a while. It's called SALT around here. I just looked at myself compared to the other college kids in terms of just like living my own, even at 17, and just the perspective difference between a 22-year-old guy who's been hanging out with his buddies for 4 years versus me who had lived my own.
Parents paying for everything for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not age, it's maturity.
There you go.
So I would just say, maybe you can date, maybe you're a special snowflake, but most of us are stupid. So it's like,
I think it's very smart because, first of all, if you are not content with yourself, why are you going to bring somebody in and potentially screw up their lives when you haven't even figured out your life?
Know what you want. I know what I want.
And how do we accomplish that? By asking those critical questions. What do I want?
And what is strategy? What is planning? Strategy is infinite options versus limited resources. Again, quoting Alex Hormozi. I love that quote. You can find all that one video, how to make so much money. You question the meaning of making money to begin with. Like, there's just a lot of stuff in there. There's a little bit of swearing. Obviously, it's all biblical, pretty material. But it's just like the whole thing about feedback and learning and why you do stuff. And just like breaking it down to the simplest level. I say, if our goal is to honor God, and our goal is to be mature, and our goal is to grow good relationships for other people, then it's like, well, and to grow a good community, all those things that God wants us to do as Christians, then why would you shortcut it? Look at every time in the Bible where someone shortcuts something, right? So, also with courting, look at Jezebel. Look at every woman in the Bible that approaches a man versus when a man approaches, and the Bible just bashes on it. So if the Bible in Proverbs is like, watch for a woman that approaches you, basically, again, I'm just quoting the Bible. Look at Proverbs, look at these different books and the warnings against them. Jezebel in Revelation, the New Testament, and then obviously in the Old Testament. Then I think the guy should approach the gal. Always. That's my opinion with courting. And it's just, the point of courtship is the mindset of, I want to do this in a respectful way that honors her father and then honors the young lady. And obviously the family of the young lady in that order, because the dad is the leader of that family, right? And I'm breaking into his territory and his family and asking for his daughter's hand in marriage in the future, meaning he's conscious versus I'm just some dude from the bar, whatever. He's going to want to kill me when he heard, oh, you've been taking my daughter out for whatever, if he's a good man, right? So it's like, for the sake of them and for the sake of, I've worked with a few guys who got married out of, they did it the wrong way. They lived together, then they got pregnant, then they got married. And they said 10 years later, he still can't get along with his dad-in-law. Still can't get along with his dad-in-law. So it's like, you will literally hurt your kid's relationship with their grandparents because they can't stand you. Like, all these, you just got to think implications of things. So that's why I just think courtship is a biblical way to do it.
And versus today's, I mean, look on some of the platforms, TikTok. You have these women coming up to these men, thinking that they are the most amazing thing, and they're like, "Oh, put your number in my phone," or would you smash me or pass me? Well, first of all, smash, that's obviously intimacy. Not biblical intimacy by any means, but that's what they've reduced sex down to the gift of, really, a gift from God. Intimacy is a gift from God. And they've relevated it down to something that is just not to be taken serious, no consequences. Except for, we know that there are tons of consequences, especially for young women out there.
Let me tell you this. I worked at a camp for a few years too, and much to my detriment, but also much to my benefit in certain ways. And I think also a grace of God is, every time I've been somewhere and worked somewhere, I usually ended up, even though I never wanted to, I always try to avoid it. It's like God put me with the worst cabin or the worst group just to see the extreme. There was these guys who just double-faced, two-sided. So I stayed in this one cabin, and they were literally watching porn in the corner at this Christian camp, and they're leading kids in Bible studies the next day. And I just remember that just like completely disgusting me. And I'm like, these young men, I just remember thinking after I talked to a mentor about it, and that guy just shook his head and says, those young men are going to completely destroy their family someday.
Absolutely.
If they can't lead a Bible study, it's such a harsh thing. And for people that, and this is a sign if God's worked in your life or not. If you fear responsibility and you scoff at it.
Now, did you talk to them about it? Did you talk about those kids about it, or did you talk to the mentor about it? I'm just curious.
It was like my first time really being
somebody in a position of authority in a camp.
I talked to someone at the end of the week about it, and I don't think those guys ever worked there again. But I knew at that point, since I'd been in high school for a year, that those guys wanted to do it. That was their goal. So I said, hey guys, I'm trying to sleep. It was like 1 a.m. Then they would just laugh at me and whatever. And, so then the next week there was this, I'll draw it out again. I think it's funny. So basically here's the food hall. Then here's like our little cabin next to the laser tag range. It was just like this tiny little trailer house thing. They call it the gingerbread house. And then I think it was literally like 3/4 of a mile walk, and then like up this steep set of stairs, and then there was this cabin, and then the nearest bathroom was like literally 1/4 mile away, like right here. They said, where do you want to stay and why? And I was the only guy with another guy that knew about these guys, and we stayed here. So I think about if I had stayed the rest of the summer in that cabin, what have I would have fallen to? And there ended up being this massive party. It was 1 week I wasn't there, thank goodness, because the camp director, I think, was ready to about kill everyone after hearing about it. Just all the staff were being two-faced, and just they just didn't know. And this is meant to be a Christian camp. It literally undermined the complete foundation of what people were teaching. Like, it just showed. I just imagine. So yes, I walked like 3 miles every day to go back forth. Well, let's look at why would I do that? Why did I do that? And why did this other guy do that? These people all got fired. I know I can't type. We stayed over here, and they just knew. Like, we had no association. The Bible says, like, let no one have any cause to, however that verse goes. And, what's up, Navidium? Welcome back. I had guarded my mind in that moment. That one decision saved me from horrible reputation, saved me from, I was just completely removed, and it saved me from a lot of scars. It saved me from a pornography addiction, and it saved me from peer pressure, because I just knew even if it's worth the walk. So with courtship versus dating, it's going to be the hard path. People are going to make fun of you. People are going to whatever. But long term, way easier.
So now when you ran into that particular situation, and obviously you were, you're kind of learning how to be a leader at that was your first opportunity at a camp, really, to be a leader. So then you went to your mentor and said, hey, this is going on. And then they gave you advice, and I'm sure they probably at that point corrected the situation. But now, like, say that same situation happened year 2, would you have handled that differently, or would you? I'm asking at that point, since you kind of were a little bit more comfortable in learning, and you kind of learned how to handle that situation. On like year 2, or maybe if the camp held multiple camps, if you saw that behavior again, would you just then address it? Was your thought process to address, if you saw 3 guys in a corner watching porn, and especially if you got other young Christians around you, would you go, is that something that you would have felt comfortable of going, hey, knock this off, and then just go backfill the counselor? I told him to knock it off.
I would say, look, we are here to serve the Lord. What's it called? Like authority and obedience, basically. I would say we are here to serve the Lord, and you're meant to be preparing your mind at night to lead these children. And these parents, this is their only break all year for a week to spend time with their family, to get to know each other well as a couple, whatever. We're meant to babysit these kids. And you're out here polluting your own minds and destroying And those same guys, this was interesting. People think, I can do these things and get away with it. I had to watch, the law says like you're meant to daycare only like 3 to 5 kids per person. I was watching 12 kids at once. They were 5 years old. So it's like herding cats.
Yeah.
Especially as 14. I didn't know anything. I was still a kid too. And these guys,
You're learning, which is the purpose of assuming roles in camps.
they weren't doing their job either.
Yep.
So if you're doing the stupid thing and you're dating someone stupid and you're doing all this other stuff, it will compound against you. And
I view it, back
in that one situation, look at the impact on that.
I mean, look how many minds you could have potentially polluted, even if they hear it.
Just with one situation at camp with 4 dudes in a cabin.
But then, I mean, you can take it to the next level of, okay, these young men are claiming to be Christians, which I think is one of the problems.
Can we pause for a second while this guy's on stream? So this guy talked about his pornography addiction on one of our podcasts. By God's grace, he said that he has cut it down by half. So praise the Lord.
Amen.
Amen. So congratulations. Whatever you did to do that, keep doing it more. We're proud of you. And we'll keep praying for you.
And if you know anybody else who's struggling, don't be the biggest thing that holds us back is shame. I mean, listen to Alan today. He openly talks about his suicide attempts and no shame in it. I was molested as a kid. A lot of people go, oh, I don't know if I tell anybody, what are they going to think? I don't care what they think about it. That's just it. I don't care. My goal is to help somebody if they're in that situation to get out of it. And if we keep it the big secret, then guess what? We can never fix it or eliminate it or do our best to eliminate it if we don't have the conversation. So, yeah, some of our conversations are uncomfortable. I get it. But we take the wins when we can take the wins, and we talk about the hard stuff without shame, because the simple fact is, a person who has experienced tragedy, the only benefit is, and they come out on the other side, or traumatic experience, and they come out on the other side, they can offer perspectives that got them through and got them to a positive mindset.
Our mistakes now, if we choose to learn from them, is wisdom for the next generation.
Exactly. So that's why I share. Hey, yeah, it happened to me, and I will tell you, being abused as a kid, guess what happened? It caused a lot of issues in my life because I never dealt with it, because I had nobody, because I felt shame, and half the stigma is just getting to the point of going, I have nothing to be ashamed about. I didn't commit the act. It was committed on me, and I just don't want anybody to have to suffer the same way I did. So that's why I openly talk about it. All my struggles in life, my struggles with alcohol, same thing. That's why we talk about it. So with you cutting down on jerking the gherkin or whatever we want to call it, just to kind of keep it light and humorous. Hey, proud of you. Good job. Keep it up. You got this. There ain't nothing you can't do without God. That I guarantee. And like Alan said last time, just try to go 10 minutes longer than you did before, and then make it an hour longer than you did before. And then pretty soon you're not doing it at all.
And let's make it a tradition right now, chat. Anyone who has conquered a sin, we will shout you out.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to shout you out.
Because those are the wins you need. Those are the things you need to keep, because if you carry it alone and you have a small victory, there's no one there to slap you in the back and say,
good
congratulations.
Job. Yeah. Celebrate it.
So
absolutely celebrate it.
And you got a W from Jess Show. That's everything too, right?
Yep. Yep. And that's the important things in life. And that's why we got to swallow our pride, get over our fear, because the devil is the one that keeps us in fear. He does.
You can change the world if you honestly get over your pride and are willing to give your problems to God.
Pride and shame. Yep.
Jeremiah went from dreaming about building a city to, in 4 months, getting the king to give him lumber. In the ancient day where everything was cut down by hand and everything, in 4 months.
Yep.
So
yeah, getting back to that whole perspective. But what the question we were originally, before we kind of got on that tangent, a good tangent, a win, and we'll take the win, was, if there was multiple camp sessions and you were there, do you think by the second time, now that you kind of had guidance on how they handled it, do you think you would been able to tell those young men, hey, you're here in serving God, and if you died tonight, would you want your last action to be that the Lord watched you watching porn in a corner at a place that is supposed to be upholding God, and you're letting the devil walk in the door?
Here's the thing I would address first is the consequence of, leaders have more responsibility. James
Absolutely.
1 or James 3:1. So I would say if you ever want, if I was, let's say I was in charge of that camp or a manager or whatever, had the authority to get them off the camp, I would say, if you ever want to work here again, if you ever want to use me as a reference, because people at the camp would often use the camp work as a reference for the resume. I'm like, if you ever want to hear anything good from me, this ends now. And we're going to watch you for a few weeks. This ends now. You need to be a responsible leader, right? Because
setting expectations, right?
Leaders bring clarity. A good leader brings clarity to stupidity. So
some would say we might be seeing that in our country now.
We did politics in the last podcast, so
I know, but I'm just saying, clarity and leadership is important.
It's so important. So it's essential.
Okay, so the answer is yes, you would.
I would.
Now, once you were equipped with the tools, you know what's wrong, so you owe them the truth from a biblical perspective of what the truth is, what the Lord says about this, and your expectations of, we're here to serve the Lord, not sins of the flesh. So you need to get right, and we're gonna watch you. But I just wanted to kind of take that next step of, you handled it because you had no experience. It was your first year. You went to your mentor. They handled it, but you kind of did the follow up from the sounds of it, and said this is the way. That they made the decision. So next time I don't even have to go to that mentor. All I have to do is say, I observed this. This is what I told them. Please vector check me to make sure I didn't give them bad information. And then they let them know about the situation that's already been handled. That shows growth as a man.
You know what I would do? Let's say I was just a junior staff or whatever, and they would just make fun of me because that's what they did.
Yep.
And I would just say, I wouldn't even tell them I'm going to do this because that would get me picked on. Be smart, be anonymous.
Right.
I would just go tell the staff. I'd say, hey, leader, hey, everyone who's in charge of me, I'm in this cabin. They're watching pornography. I don't want to be there. Can I either move or can you take care of this? Because they're going to ruin my week and I'm going to do bad work for you because I'll be discouraged. Right. And,
So you're providing the feedback.
I work in a K. Just so says I work in a K through second grade class, and they're always watching even when I'm not teaching.
Exactly.
The kids are always watching. Yeah, for sure. So the testimony of our lives is our whole life, not just the quote unquote best moment.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Absolutely. Cool.
In before the marriage stage, you want to be in your best moment all the time so you don't fall. So that's why courtship is good, because you set the proper boundaries to where you guys see the best of each other. Because if you showed everyone your worst side right away, you might scare people off. But I'm just joking. But
So then with the girl, what expectations are you setting? You've talked to the father, and you're saying, hey, I'm a man of God. I'm not looking to bed your daughter. I'm not, I'm not looking to be kissing her. I'm not looking to be groping her. Here's my intentions. Here's my thoughts on, and you've had that whole conversation with dad, and whether he's biblical or not, doesn't
think about from this
matter.
Perspective. What man in this culture wouldn't respect that?
Exactly.
And that, talk about standing out of the flock.
Yep.
You would stick out like a good sore thumb, right? You would.
Like, holy cow, this guy's telling me, hey, these are my intentions. This is how I think.
Yeah. So.
And I don't, if we're not meant to be, I don't want to ruin your daughter for another man. That's how much I respect her. And
Because
that's how much I respect my fellow
as far as
man.
I understand fathers, they just want to see that the young man sees the value of their daughter that they see.
Yes.
So, which if the father has low value of their family, you can it'd probably be very easy to get a yes, which is sad. But again, you can break that generational curse if the young lady's a godly young lady, and you know,
Exactly.
again,
Exactly.
but you gotta ask what you want to deal with. Like, if I had the choice, I would rather go date someone that has a whole family instead of someone that has a completely torn up family. But again, it's down to the qualities of the person, not the whatever.
Not the family situation, because you can look at JD Vance. I mean, look at our vice president. He had a very hard upbringing, but you know what? He relies on his faith.
So
But
you have to remember.
but he also made choice. He had choices in his life to follow down the path of his mom, and he didn't, because he saw the damage that it did, and he knows the damage he did as a kid. Same thing with when I grew up. I saw what it was like not to eat. So guess what? I made it a point that my kids would never know that. But I want to tell the story of why I made the decisions and why I am willing to work myself to death if need be for my family, because I don't want them to suffer the way I want them to do. I want them to do better than I did, and that's the whole American dream in a nutshell. And then if we do it for the glory of God, well, gosh, how can we fail?
And that's why I would tell any friend of mine or any son of mine, move out for a year. Just know what it's like to be broke once.
Then
you
just also have to notify, and you'll get it when you're content, right? You'll get when you have to be content with yourself. If you are not happy with yourself, bringing somebody else into your misery will never bring you happiness. It will just make two miserable people. So that's why I say,
especially if you're a miserable person, you're probably going to find miserable people.
Yep.
A high quality lady wouldn't bother.
Yep, she's not going to bother. But the same thing is now you're, instead of breaking the generational curse of broken families or whatever, what are you doing? You're prolonging that curse for that family because you're not following according to Scripture. Doesn't mean we don't.
The Bible says, "Be fruitful and multiply."
Yep.
You were talking about those broken kids in those communities, just in general.
Yep.
Not just that any race, just people. In my opinion, one race, all race, right?
We're all human beings. We were all born in the image of
human race.
We were born in the image of God. Doesn't matter the color of our skin. We're all God's children.
Yeah, I did.
We were born in His image. Whether we choose to be His child is a different story. But
yeah, Navidium. That's why I think about all this stuff. I consider myself to be on borrowed time. 4 years in the making, because I tried to kill myself at 14. So it's very clear to me that I'm on borrowed time. Like, God could, when I tried to kill myself, I basically had a moment where I would say I saw hell for a second. I don't want to describe it, but it was just, I've seen a little more than the other, so, and, but God, it's more
there's consequences for your actions.
But it's also, God has just had a great measure of grace in my life. It's all God's work, because, you've seen me want to make a lot of stupid decisions. It's just nothing let me, right? Because that's God's grace.
Or you're making a stupid decision and somebody decided to make a phone call and say, hey, you're making dumb decisions.
I was a bull in a china shop, but he tied me down. That's the thing. Or I got to point this way. So, so it's like, again, if you're a young man, the biggest cheat code, the biggest thing you can do, pursue wisdom. How do you pursue wisdom? Talk to wise men. Talk to a good Christian guy who's doing what you want to do in life. That's a perfect mentor. And, for sure. So
things tend to turn out a lot better when we have a God-focused. No, they don't tend. They do turn out better when we have a God-focused belief.
My favorite quote that I recently made up with a friend of mine is, God helps us win in all ways. Like,
yep.
I just seen answered prayer, and it's just like, if I had solved that problem myself, I'd only solve this one narrow thing in my life, but I have all these other things. God solves it, and it's just like, my whole life is a little better. So I don't need to focus on it, because we have narrow minds. We're meant to depend on God. So
I mean, I had a great blessing today. My wife called me on the way over to the podcast, and she goes, because I own a vegetable farm, right? And one of the things we're gonna do this year is we're gonna do what they call community supported agriculture, right? And that's basically where they pay for a share, but they get X amount of items for X amount of weeks at an X amount of price. It's something we haven't done on the farm, but
subscription model, basically.
Basically a subscription model. Yep. And so I put it out that we were looking to do it. And lo and behold, somebody from one of the local newspapers sat there and said, hey, we want to do an article on what you're going to do. And I'm like, cool. But I got a young lady who
I need to hit on this comment.
Okay, hit it real quick.
So I have a friend who liked this person, and the friend pretended to like him. Let me just tell you something about moving out and what courtship. All this drama, all this social whatever, snowflakes, whatever's going on.
Social noise.
Social noise is a choice of yours instead of you're forced to be in that environment. Because you've lived on your own for a year. You know who your friends are. And if you date someone who's also an adult, then they also have that decision. All that drama and all that really stuff that is just complete waste of time.
Johnny broke up with Kimmy.
It doesn't exist unless you want it to. So that's my whole answer for that. But back to the farm thing.
So anyway, so I talked to I got this young 16-year-old lady. She doesn't quite know what she wants to do. And I said, well, hey, at least while you're on the phone, on the farm with us, let's give you the opportunity to learn some skills. So here's what we're going to do. And I made her a business decision offer. And I'm like, here's your canvas, which is about 22 acres. Let's paint it how you envision. And let's teach you leadership. And let's teach you task organization. And I mean, she has a lot of these skills anyway. But
just so people know, that's his staff member.
From a biblical standpoint, all I'm trying to do is get her further ahead in life. And from a biblical standpoint, I'm trying to teach her the value of money and the thoughts that go behind decisions, and that's very important. But the cool thing is, so because I made this one post, now they want to do an article, and my goal is to get her to a point where if she only wants to work one job, she only has to work one job.
Hey guys, what's cool about the newspaper thing? He's given so much to the community. There's been so many people that probably walked up to the. Can you turn your mic so I don't catch it?
Yep.
So there's been so many people that he's helped and given to. He built the cross on the hill. He has good, affordable prices. He'll give food to the poor, all this stuff. I've witnessed it. It's helped me. It completely changed how I see giving on a practical level as a business guy. And now he's getting free advertising because the community wants to give back. That's why I love Alex Ramazzi's mindset with giving is give until it drives people crazy. And then they're like, what can we give you?
Yeah.
And that's why you have to serve people. And that's the whole thing with dating too, to always tie it back. You just do your best. You don't want to focus on yourself. You want to focus on growing yourself to serve others better.
Exactly.
So from Charlie's perspective, the best thing in the world for him to do is to become a better Charlie Puffer.
Exactly.
The best thing for Alan Johnson to do is become a better Alan Johnson who does what? Focuses on God.
Focuses on God, aligns, make sure that my actions and my words and actions match God, match God's teachings. So I become that better, more aware individual. And I will tell you, he's been working in my life. Like I said, that blessing, that, an article in a small town paper, some people are like, oh, this is a pain in the butt. My thing is, this is free advertising. And guess what? It may allow me to sell all 100 shares, and then I can ensure that this young lady I'm bringing up gets paid a living wage. So that's just kind of how I look at it,
Yeah.
So that's one of the blessings that just happened today. But where before I'd be like, well, I did all the work. Well, yeah, you can take that mentality. I did all the work, but everything had to align for that work to take place. And for somebody to see that article, forward it to the local newspaper and go, hey, you might want to do a story on this, or that local newspaper reporter seeing it, and we end up getting free advertising. I get to help a young lady, and I get to grow a business, and she gets to make a living wage, and she gets to learn how to be a manager of people and time and money and learn how to order things, I mean, what a blessing all the way around.
Yeah.
So
One thing I'll keep track of, chat, for your sake, is we'll probably put chapters on our podcast in post. Just
yeah.
We're working on the production thing. We had a thumbnail thing and it fell down, but
Did it?
Yeah. So I'll have to. I tried to tape it up myself. I was like, need 3 hands. So
maybe we'll get some more command hooks, put a little hole in the corner, and stick it on. Yep, we got some.
So we can just use the sticky side, and that would work.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah. So we'll do chapters and posts, but I think we can move on to the next topic.
So what's your thoughts on the boundaries with the girlfriend as far as intimacy, that kind of stuff? And how do you go about setting your expectations as you're having those conversations? Is what I really want to know.
Well, what do I know about young men objectively, and what do I know about myself as being a young man? I know how I think, and I know I am weak. I can say that. I'm not humble enough to say that. I just know I'm dumb. So,
what's one of the biggest temptations? Sins of the flesh.
What is the Bible? The only sin that the Bible commands you not to fight and stand strong with, but to run from, is lust. So, if God is saying,
it says free.
Yeah. So if that's the case, I would rather have insanely high boundaries than too low of boundaries. If I had to choose one.
Okay.
Obviously, there's balance, but
so what does that look for Alan Johnson in his mind? We're not saying this is what your thoughts are.
This is Alan Johnson's opinion.
Yep,
of course,
exactly.
The TikTok people never include that in the YouTube short, but again, that's fine. So Alan Johnson's opinion is very, I would say no kissing until either engagement or marriage, because that's what my parents did, and it just seems like such an honorable way to do it. It's just like, I always think, what sounds like a cool story, what also sounds ethical, if you do that, those two things, and obviously for God's glory, that's a pretty good framework for most things. So for my sake, just because I know the way I think, I'd rather sit across the table. I'd probably, have something between the middle part of the car. Just be in public. Just have good boundaries where there's just not even a thought for it because there's people around, there's whatever, so that I have no room to fail. So there's nothing to flee from because it's just like there's good boundaries in place. I'd rather have too high of boundaries. And then if they were a great lady, I would probably just get married younger and quicker. Like, I think getting married in 6 to 12 months, if they're a good person, I'm okay with that. Again, I'm not in college. I'm working. I'm providing for myself. And my goal is to start a business. I know what I want, right? And I would date someone who would know what they want. So with those caveats, I think dating for 5 years is kind of dumb because you're just kind of setting yourself up for that. Again, there's certain circumstances. I'm not in the military. I'm not in all this other stuff. But I'm saying in my specific circumstance, I would just set very high boundaries. And just for the young lady's sake, too, if I was dating.
Yeah.
Just for her mindset. Just say, yeah, I know this guy.
So you're not. So your idea is we're not going to be doing until we're. It doesn't mean we can't set close. Yeah. And we can't look at them lovingly, but your idea is to be very traditional, and hey, there's not going to be any kissing before there's a ring on her finger.
Yeah, exactly.
And I honestly, 100%, if you can do that.
Because the way a youth group described it to me, First Congo Church, it was a really good youth group when I went, was, they described it as the human body isn't designed to stop. Because, you got to think, what is sex? It's breeding, right? So your body is full of instincts. It's basically engineered to do that. Like when one mentor says, all your body wants to do, all the flesh wants to do is just make babies. You don't think of it that way, but it's just, So just like predators see movement, then they go kill it. That's their instinct. That's what we have as humans. Just because we're intelligent doesn't mean we don't have instincts, and we're very emotional. We're unconscious, emotional creatures 99% of the time with our actions. And to answer Chad's question, what if both teenagers are Christians and know what not to do? We all know what not to do. Doesn't matter if you're Christian or not. It's putting yourself in a place where you just won't do it. It's not knowing.
It's being intentional in your settings and surroundings when you're.
The true freedom we have is the freedom to set up our environment. Everything else from there.
That's what I was getting at. Man, you're doing good, Alan.
Thanks. So that's what I would say, is just have no room for Satan to win.
Making sure you're not putting yourself in the position where things can turn to lust.
Yeah.
Watching the movie with the lights on versus lights off.
And let me warn against something for young guys. I spent my first year of 2 years working on that camp. I had the crush on this girl. I was 14, and I got so wrapped up in it. Like I wasted an entire summer. I didn't do good work. I didn't do whatever. I spent more weeks at the camp when I could have. I had a plant collection that basically all died out in a hobby of mine because I had signed up for all these weeks at camp. Like everything that I was working towards or wanted to do got stunted by just an emotion.
Because you came out of balance.
I came out of balance. And I never even asked them or anything. Like, it was all in my head.
You lusted over her for the whole summer and she didn't even know you existed.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So, again, that's a mistake I've made. I think your mic's catching mine. We got to figure that out later, don't we? So,
I don't see nothing on my side, but
it does sometimes.
Yeah.
Chad, does it sometimes sound double or not? Test, test, test. Hello. Weird. But yeah, so like that taught me, if I ever would ever go into a relationship, to look at it just like I'd look at a friendship, where keep the lovey-doveys away, keep the butterflies. And I think that's what's so good. It's hard to feel like that when you're in public and you're around, and
when your friends have your best interest of, hey guys, my policy is no PDA. So I'm hanging around people with like beliefs. So
I'll give you an example from like a month ago. I was like trying to be lazy one night. I wasn't door dashing, and I had 3 people call me and ask how I was doing. Because like I just always call people while I DoorDash, and then people who normally wouldn't reach out just kept reaching out because they were so used to me reaching out. Like there was just a structure in my life, so it's harder to be stupid and lazy. And then so I was like, fine, I'll get off my butt and I'll get to work, because they're like, what are you doing? Like I'm learning accountability, and I need to crank that up way more. I'm with my pastor today. I want even more, because it's just like, get those good habits rolling in your life. You'll have people, hey, how'd your date go the other night? Did you have a pure thought? Or what did you, because what is it? Impure thought, impure temptation to an impure thought. And then you have enough thoughts about it. Then you have words about it. And then you have actions about it. And the actions destroy everything. But it starts with, how did you deal with the temptation?
I'm laughing because I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
Beautifully put, Alan. Beautifully put. And that's just it. So Alan's thing is no PDA until there's a ring on it.
What's that mean?
Public displays of affection.
Yeah, exactly.
And sex won't happen until they are married.
And what's that one stat with young ladies?
So statistics are women who have over 80% of the women that have double-digit partners have issues pair bonding. And for folks that don't understand what pair bonding is, meaning staying in love with their mate. There's several animals throughout the animal kingdom. Eagles typically only mate with one
a lot of birds. Yeah.
A lot of birds only mate with one thing throughout their lifetime, one partner throughout their lifetime.
Some eagles, some owls.
Yep. So that same concept. And after 10, 80% of the women cannot bond with a mate. And so if we truly respect the woman and we truly we respect ourselves and we respect the women, we're not going to do anything to even jeopardize that woman's future.
And let's just look at history. Let me, so just from, this is 10 years. So let's just say sexually aware at 16 or able or in that place to, average person gets married at what, 30 or something?
I don't know those statistics.
Let's say 16 to 26, right?
10 years.
10 years. It's pretty likely that that young lady would sleep around with that many people.
Especially in today's society and culture with what they say is acceptable.
Especially, you're becoming a CPA, you're becoming whatever, 18 through 22 college years, party.
Yep.
It's like, this is Satan's playground. So I would rather be, what's the Bible say? If you're, get married lest you burn with lust, basically, as far as I understand that verse. I would just rather get married around this age and, have God's way of doing it for the rest of my life instead of just sinning and destroying generations and whatever.
Because remember, man's worldview is, the women should go out and sleep around, the guys should go out and sleep around. Test drive. Well, guess what?
Absolutely.
It ruins women. And and men, it does. Because guess what? If you've only known one woman, guess what? You don't know whether the sex is good or bad. I mean, the intimacy is good or bad because you only know one thing. And to sit there, especially that being the devil's playground, the more you know about it, the more your mind wanders back to this partner, that partner, experiences that were definitely not godly. There's no probably about it. They weren't. And then you wonder why you're having all these issues. And so if you truly respect the purpose of what God made our partners for, then out of the respect for God and out of the respect for the woman, especially knowing the statistics on it, as a young man, who would want to make a woman's life, any human being's life, more miserable and less likely to be successful? I mean, think about it, whether they're with a man or not.
Exactly.
If you know the statistics of the pair bonding issue and you go about, because you are enlightened at that point, and you go out and you're bedding all these women, you're knowingly destroying women, and it says you do not care about, honestly, it says you do not care about them, and you don't care about your fellow human being, and you're making life harder for everybody. Because the man, some man may marry her, and if she's been through a lot of men, then that's an issue.
That's a good way to destroy a country.
And it's a great way to destroy a country. It's destroying
our country.
It is. And that's how you got to look at it. Because we have the knowledge. We know what it does to women. The statistics are there. So if we love God and we are trying to honor the Father, then we must honor women and we must make better choices. And I will tell you, I failed at that. However, I do not want and I'll own it. What I don't want is the generation after generation buying into the man's worldview, because that's basically what I did. I bought into the man's worldview. Oh, sleep around all you want, no consequences. Oh yeah, there's all kinds of consequences that they don't tell you about. So, again, congratulations on Alan for knowing what he wants and having thought and prayed about it. Huge. So, living arrangements, Alan. Unless you got something else to wrap her up with. Living arrangements. Should we shack up?
So I think living together is one of the dumbest things you can do. I'm yet to hear a story. You know what I'm talking about when it's like these couples where the guy's living with the girl and the girl's just waiting for the guy to ask them to marry them. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
That has to be such a common thing. I know it's a stereotype, whatever. Again, cancel me, I don't care. It's just the fact of like,
truth needs to be told.
For their sake, for your sake, for security's sake, for children's sake, because sex makes babies. Oh no, who knew that? So people forget that. Birth control doesn't always work. Yeah, and there was a thing they showed us at Summit. It was basically a graph along the lines, I don't need to draw it out, but basically just where the pleasure in the short term is like great for the first 2 years. and then they actually have a disconnect sexually. But in the marriage, it showed just off surveys that it grows better and better and better because people know each other. Again, one man, one woman.
And I don't have the statistics offhand on shacking up. I know it's extremely high that people that shack up prior to marriage, the divorce rate is considerably higher. I don't have the statistics. I'm sure we could pull it up, but I just remember.
I think it comes down just to mindset, because if you have the wrong mindset, the consumer mindset, as soon as Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot. A friend pointed it out to me is, the mic's echoing. Oh, okay, just double checking.
You were saying Jordan Peterson talked about it.
Jordan can't talk. Jordan Peterson talked about that a lot. Where, as soon as you, what were we talking about?
Shacking up.
Yeah, like as soon as you, I lost my train of thought. Dang it.
Okay, well, sometimes it happens. It'll come back to you.
Editor, you know what to do.
Get rid of it. but I want you to hear, listen to the names of the people he's talking. These are all highly successful people. Not all of them are biblical. I'm not saying all of them are biblical, but these are successful people. So reading a book from successful people sets you up for success. Now, we also need to be reading the Bible because that's the ultimate guide to success. But when you're reading to people that are doing the right thing and setting up the feedback loops so they get the feedback so they know what to do in life. He's talking Jordan Peterson. Yep. He's talking Jordan Peterson. You talk Lex Friedman. You talk Paul Washer today. But he's just been citing book after book after book. I like John C. Maxwell on leadership books. 360 Leader.
Atomic Habits. How to Win Friends, Influence People.
Yep.
Just A Sign of Intelligence. Can you list 10 books that you've read in the last 2 years?
But it's knowing it's looking at winners and figuring out how they became winners, and if ever given the opportunity to engage with somebody who's a millionaire or a billionaire, if you ever get that opportunity, you need to ask them how they became successful. If they got 10, 15 minutes, just say, what did you do?
I actually recently talked to a millionaire, and I had 10 minutes of his time, and I got him to talk about what he was excited about, and I got an hour and a half. So talk to people what they're interested in. Again, first book I'd recommend anyone. It's a really funny, witty book written by this awesome guy in the 1930s called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Old English humor. And just story after practical story. I love it on audiobook because by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I would recommend it on Audible. It's like $10. It's cheap. Again, the $600, $700 I spent on books this year, I think is worth the college education because of 50 books. It's insane.
And I can tell you, to see the growth in this young man this year, phenomenal. You can see he's getting it. Because guess what he's doing? He's educating himself. He's fleshing out what his beliefs are. So when he enters the dating scene, he already knows who he is. Think about that. Think the power of that. That's huge. And guess what? So he's going to come up with his own things, and then he's going to keep reading on things that intrigue him, that make him excited. Things that you engage in conversation in books that pique your curiosity. So always be curious, right?
Well, I pique books that pique my curiosity, but also that I know I need to hear.
Yeah.
So I was struggling with productivity. Still am a little bit, but way less. So I read Deep Work by Cal Newport. Changed my mind. It changed my life. So, or I was wondering, how do people really work? I read a book called Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini. So if you want a really easy book list, look up Alex Hormozi book list. And he's like, here's the top 13 books I read. And I'm halfway through that list, and it's completely just doubled my understanding of business. So there's one called Expert Secrets by Robert Brunson. He's like a marketing genius that I look forward to reading. But I took a break from the audiobook. This is a trap I fell into. I'm just reading the Bible in audiobook.
There you go.
So just to
It's again, you realized and see, this is what happens. The more you read, the more you learn, the more you understand how things work. Nobody had to tell him he was reading too many audiobooks, right? He realized on his own, okay, yeah, I'm consuming a lot of information, but guess what?
I'm not in the Bible as much.
I'm not in the Bible, so guess what? Bible is my primary book. I need to make sure I master that because it's a master class on life. And he was self-aware that, hey, why things that are going to grow me, I'm neglecting the thing that is most important in my life, which is a God-centered life. And you went back to that, and you brought balance back. And if somebody is Alan's friend, and they see that Alan is consuming all this but forgetting about the Bible, then we as fellow men and women need to go, hey, Alan, I get you're getting a lot of information, but you need to make sure you're staying up on the Bible. And that's what true friends do, right? Yeah. But the cool thing is,
Tom was like, Alan, you're learning all this business stuff, but I don't see any progress. Get to work. And I was like, got it.
Yep.
So still learning that lesson. And I'm working on that. I'm trying to hit the gym more.
What did he do there? He self-balanced. He goes, hey, I'm losing sight of what is the most important thing. And that's what happens when you're reading and you're in the Word. Is
for those of you who just have started enough to
no, that's fine.
So for those of you who have no idea where to start, I'll tell you where I was a year and a half ago. Basically a year ago. It wasn't that long. Like, let's say a year and a few months. 17, driving a car I didn't own. I had $1,800 to my name, and I didn't know who to trust. And I was completely stressed and like depressed and completely losing my mind. And I had nowhere to stay. And I remember stopping at the stoplight here in Cedar Falls and being like, God, this is for my own progress. I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is I need help with our family relationship. That one prayer keeps coming to my mind. And God keeps answering it over and over. Ooh, there's a verse I gotta look up in Joshua. So how about you hit on the next thing while I look that up?
Okay. So we're talking boundaries, not living together. And yeah, on the shacking up thing, don't do it. And honestly, if you're renting, I would tell you don't even rent with the opposite sex.
Oh, absolutely
not. There's just too much, and typically, yeah, that's not an issue, but there's still there can always be that temptation.
I haven't got a roommate yet because I've just had this gut feeling in my mind the entire time where it's like, if I just rent with the average guy, or with just a dude who isn't really motivated, I'm going to be having all those ideas, and I'll probably talk to him about him, and he's just going to shoot it down, and I'm going to just not grow. So I'm willing to pay the $800 versus $400 a month. Again, should I have gotten a roommate a year ago? Absolutely. Big mistake. But at the same time...
Oh, potentially. But I mean, we can't look back on that because you don't know, because you could have got a very bad roommate who could lead you astray too.
I would just say guard your heart and everything in your environment. Create, like Alex Mazzi says, create friction around the bad things. Like he says, the work 12 hours and spend no money for 30 days straight. Like, I just love that idea. Obviously, as Christians, the Sabbaths honor that, but it's the, you can hit two birds with one stone, where if you're so it was work life versus family life.
Okay. So, Alan, from what you said on work life, family life, so it sounds like you would like a traditional woman to stay home. So that's one of your goals. So anybody who wants to be a career woman, and then maybe eventually settle down, that's probably not the right fit. So if Alan runs into a young lady who goes, well, I want to be a professional, and um, I want to be a professional, and yeah, we'll have kids, but I don't want to stay home. As soon as I'm able, I want to get back to work. Is that somebody that Alan should even entertain as a partner? Waste his time as a partner?
Maybe one phone call, ask those questions, and hey,
You might go, oh, I like this girl. And then, it might take a week to kind of get where you're talking about, life goals, that kind of stuff. But at the point she says, hey, I want to be a professional woman, well, that goes against what Alan wants to do. Life is tough enough already. So, or they go, well, maybe that'll change once I have kids. Well, the kind of, my philosophy is, if they're wishy-washy on it, well, and you want to stay at home mom because you think it's important for the woman to impart the biblical stuff outside of church and in lessons throughout life, biblical principles and teachings, and she wants to work all the time, then Alan needs to go, hey,
like if your
this is a hard break. This is non-negotiable for
your
me.
relationship is meant to grow like this, why would you already set up one contention with?
Why would you start the tree like this is the question? Because the tree's supposed to grow together, right? Into
If you
one.
cut a sapling in half, it's going to die.
And if you cut it in half, at worst that's going to happen is you're going to have two trees, but they end up growing out to the completely opposite direction. So anytime that a woman does not meet your criteria, and for you women, if you know what you want, whether you want to be a career woman or a stay-at-home mom, again, don't make if his goals and priorities don't align with you, don't waste the time on the relationship. Women, oh, I can change him. Point is, you shouldn't have to change the man.
And another thing,
And if you've had those conversations, you don't, and they're not aligned, you just go, hey, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but this is not right. This doesn't align with my goals. I don't think you're a terrible person. Our goals just don't align. And then he moves on to the next gal. And again, there's been no PDA. There's been no intimacy. So guess what? To him, it's an interaction of this didn't work out. And then he finds the next girl, and then the next girl, it aligns with 100% of his things, and then that's something he's going to invest the time with.
Exactly.
So we were talking about Joshua.
Yeah. So with Joshua, there's this one verse. I heard this the other day on audio, and it's such a powerful thing. The people that were faithful to the Lord of the Israelites. Now, many of them weren't, but this is to the ones that were faithful. An entire generation wasn't, and they weren't allowed to go into the land, but this generation was faithful. Thus the Lord gave to Israel all the land that he swore to give to their fathers. They took possession of it, and they settled there. And the Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their fathers. Not one of their enemies had withstood them, for the Lord had given their enemies into their end. In 45. Not one word of the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All came to pass. So this is a context of where this little group of people, former slave,
doing is in line with the Lord's will. Everything the Lord promises comes to pass, correct?
Like if I actually managed to get my will even slightly aligned with God's will and find a young lady that was the same way, then all those career things, all those whatever, it might be the discussion of, well, you have these goals, I have those goals. Let's pray about it for a week. See what you think.
Yeah.
And then don't change yourself for the person. That's horrible. If you have a quirk, if you have something that is just part of what you do and they make fun of it every time you're around them, absolutely not. That will destroy you. Again, more camp stories. I saw all these people date, and yeah. So again, I'm thankful for those life experiences, but I just loved Joshua 20.
God's promises come to pass, which is the beauty of living with the Lord, whatever that may be in your life. But
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then we were talking about, hey, we're not going to shack up, right? How much time do we have before you have to go, Alan?
20 minutes.
20 minutes?
So
Okay.
that should be enough.
Yeah, I think we're pretty good. We can talk the rest of this on the next podcast.
Yeah, maybe. So,
Well, if you got time Wednesday,
oh yeah, I do. So,
um, we can hammer out. We can kind of come in as a part two, and
then I'll be busy Friday. So, yeah.
yep, you'll be busy Friday, and we'll be back as soon as we can be back.
Yep.
Reason we didn't post so much this week is I was just sick, and no offense, what I had, Alan did not want. Because
I got it for a day. I felt pretty sick for a little bit.
oh boy, my stomach was
I
told
dodged
up.
it, though.
But you know what? We're back and healthy, and and I enjoy these conversations, and I enjoy listening to Alan and getting his perspectives, because if you're not thinking like this young man, I mean, he's so much further ahead than a lot of folks his age, and you know, it's those kind of things that, like I said, if I was his dad watching this podcast, I'd be 100% proud of my young man, because the thoughts and the wisdom behind the thoughts is just phenomenal, and I think it's going to be game changing for our audience, honestly. So with that, we're going to call her a day. We thank you. We thank you for.
We have like 10, 20.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, heck, we can go a little
2
bit
minutes
longer.
or what?
I thought you said 2 minutes, but
Oh, my bad. I didn't know. So yeah, thank you for those compliments. Thank you.
but it's absolutely. This is why we do it. This is exactly why I want to do it. I love listening to this man and his perspective, this young man and his perspective, because everything is very well thought out, and it's in line biblically. So what more can you ask? Just absolutely amazing. Okay, so let's see.
It's family life. I have a pretty simple perspective on this one.
Okay.
After working in the farm with you and seeing how you did it, is if you had a homeschooled family and you had a home business, and he used to feed me lunch, so I would get really hungry because I was growing up. I was 16, and I would just look forward to lunch and just mouth-watering cooking that your wife does. It's so good. And I've been blessed to be around a lot of good cooking growing up, by God's grace. And yeah, so again, not like a required thing in a wife of mine, but I would love it. That's how they'd win my heart. So, and just
Well, there's a reason they say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach.
yeah, so true.
If you feed a good man, and you feed him well, and you take care of your man, and he takes care of you, and it's a reciprocal thing, man, a good man who's being fed good, is appreciated, well cared for by his wife, makes sure he takes care of his wife also.
For him, it's mostly just providing and listening well.
Providing, listening, and giving her the break. Like I'll tell you, in a war zone, my wife had it much, much harder than me, because I had one job, that was to stay alive. She had to take care of the kids. She had to cook. She had to clean. She had to pay the bills. And those kind of things. If you got a woman like that, the only thing you have to focus on at that time in my life was, all I got to do is stay alive. That was my focus. Stay alive.
And work really hard.
And work really hard, right? Work really hard at staying alive.
So I read a book.
She made it easy. And then when I came home, she knew I was having, and not that the dining facility food was bad, but it's still not home cooking. And man, she was making me all my favorites. She appreciated everything. And then, my wife worked the farm last year. And while I'm not a cruise person, I'm sending her on a 14-day cruise this year, just in appreciation. And she's going with her family, which, it's just my way of, if you want to go, I appreciate everything you do. I can take care of myself for 14 days. Thank you. and give her a chance to spend time with her family a little bit more and continue to foster that relationship.
I give you a 12-hour day to solve a big problem that you've been waiting on,
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
there's so many positives to doing
Yep.
it right. That's why, because this universe is made for good things to be done. So
Absolutely.
you win in every way when you treat people right. That's why lies have short shelf life, and honesty will always make you win. That's why I tell my editors who work on my projects, I'm like, look, don't cut corners. I'll see it. Maybe I won't, but then this will hurt. And then the kids can get plugged in, and they don't have to work around dad all the time, because working with dad isn't always the greatest. Maybe it is. Depends on the kid.
Yeah.
So get them
It's on the relationship too.
So Sam Walton, right? His daughter at 12 ran a register. Made in America, right? He was this 1960s guy, good, honest guy. I don't know if he was a believer, but he had he had really good values. They served in their church, right? So he didn't talk about that too much. He talked about business, but in his bibliography, which he didn't even want to write, but his family made him write, because he just so many valuable stories. He started Walmart and Sam's Club, so he knew some things. He's a good guy. He just conquered retail and completely changed it, the history of retail, right? So he's a man worth listening to, Sam Walton. And his wife would help. His kids would help in the business. So it's like, why have this cultural thing of, you have this thing like the honeymoon phase and then the boring phase, or the work-life balance, then the, vacation time. It's just like, why mix it all up? Why separate it? When if you set up your life correctly, that's why I like entrepreneurship so much, is you can, I can solve problems all day, all night, and I could do that with the family. What a life. And then my kids can see me as I'm working. They don't just see dad when he's tired at home and wanting to watch football or whatever, just wanting to sit down when he's whooped. They see him in the morning when he's fresh. They just get more time with their dad. Obviously they have their work to do and things, but.
And if you are working in a family business setting, what are you teaching at a very young age? You're teaching critical thinking skills, mindsets. When your kid comes up and asks you, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing business stuff." Well, okay, I'm making it. How about what if you're really doing is studying a proposal of that's going to bring potentially bring $500,000 to your family.
Or let me give a classic example. You're doing taxes.
You're doing taxes.
You're sitting there, you're writing your forms, you're writing your files, you're getting seats together for the big number of here's what I made, here's what I didn't make, and 10 more minutes. So what I would do with my kids, be like, so there's this thing in the United States where if you make money and you give away some money and there's expenses in your business, the government will actually reward you for putting those things towards your business. The government actually, you teach them politics, you teach them geoeconomics, whatever, and you can make
economics. If you got to pay 10,000, if it's towards the end of the year, but not before the 31st, when you're into a new tax year, and you're doing your finances, and you sit there and you're like, holy cow, I'm going to have to pay $12,000 to the federal government, or instead of spending that. And you got your son who's even 8, 9, and say, the government has all these different rules, and there's ways to take advantage of those rules.
There's a clip I saw in The Office where this guy's like explaining taxes to his daughter, and he takes a sandwich, and like all the girls' lunch, and like he opens her yogurt really rough and takes like 3 bites, puts it down, takes her sandwich, eats a bite, and she's like, "Daddy, what are you doing?" And he just eats like a third of her lunch. He's like, that's what taxes do.
Yeah.
So I thought that was funny. So you could visualize that.
Situation, that's when you go, well, we have 2 choices here, son. I can either write the check to the government for $12,000, or I can spend $12,000 and write that off and pay the government nothing.
Well, let me tell you about a time of ignorance of taxes I had. I filed under my father as a 16-year-old, which means I filed underneath my father's tax bracket as a 16-year-old. I had made $10,000 working for him. I went out to eat all the time, which he told me not to do. I didn't write off anything. So and then I spent $1,000 on my first gaming PC. I was pretty proud of it. I had like $3,000 or $4,000 left in the bank. Okay, working an entire summer, like it was, in my perspective, working my butt off. Like it was the first time I'd done that. Taxes come around, and I asked Dad, "How's this all work?" And it was just kind of rushed, ran through the system. I wasn't taught how to do taxes that year. I missed it. you owe the IRS $3,000. I'm like, wait, what the hell? I don't say that. $3,000?
Which is everything he saved up.
Yeah. Which, I mean, saving 30 of your money, that's pretty good.
Yep.
But then I was like, what? So first of all, if you have a job, I would highly recommend, for at least my preference, is not do a 1099 job, but do a W-2 job if you're not disciplined at all, because you won't remember to write stuff down. Because now with DoorDash, I met the lady the other night. Yeah, it's nice. I'm making $20 to $25 an hour or whatever. I'm like, do you write off your miles? She's like, what? This is a 40-year-old lady, probably maybe even 50. And this is what's great about having. There's a book called The 4 Pillars of Manslaughter. It talks about just how men are supposed to know things. I just love that. And I told her, this is at some restaurant, and I was like, you realize that you won't have to pay any taxes by the time you write off like your miles and stuff, right? Like, you have to pay taxes on that. She's like, wait, really? I'm like, yeah. So that's why
You get a deduction for your miles, which is better than paying per gallon.
Yeah. Well, you just don't really track that. So all I'm saying is, to that lady, you can spare people a lot of pain, because that $3,000 check I wrote to go to who knows where, to wasting it in our government, in my opinion, So with work-life balance, all I'm saying is, with the kids and stuff, is build an environment where, work at a place that has a take your kid to work day. Yep. Make it fun. And then that will make you have fun at your work too, because you're thinking from a kid's perspective. And I think to have play and have fun in what you're doing makes life lighter and better and faster.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I mean, it makes a huge difference. And the cool thing is, if you're building a Christian-based company and you've got good Christian employees, and I mean, if you build a good Christian-centered business, then their children are potentially your children's workers in the future even.
Just imagine if you had 10 kids that could help you on the farm.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You could do anything.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's why they had a lot of kids back then.
Well, yeah, they needed
hired labor was not a thing.
Yeah, they didn't hire labor.
You're out in the middle of the prairie with no one. It's just you and your family. So.
Yep. And a lot to do. So, because there wasn't the industrialization that we have today. We don't have. I think the biggest grain platform they have right now is I think it's a 52 or a 60 footer.
Yeah.
A beanhead. I think it's elite. A beanhead that is 52 to 60 feet. That used to be 10 kids. And soybeans weren't really a huge thing. They
used to farm like 3 acres, and now we farm. Now you get by. You need like 3,000
at a minimum.
It's ridiculous. So,
and you might even have a second job if you're traditional farming.
I don't know any farmers that like the way this is why my dad does it. He has a business. Well, there's 2 types of companies, as far as I understand. You have the ones who serve the providers, like on YouTube. I think most of my viewers will understand this. You have the people that make the TikToks, and you have the people that work for the people that make the TikToks. You have the editors. You have so the business I want to get into is the one who serves the producers. Because to be a producer, it's hard compared to being the ones who serve. Like, if you built a planter and sold them in bulk, and you just have the little manufacturing shop, versus having to go in debt for 1 acre that's $20,000 when you need $3,000, or to rent them is $600 a year per acre. It adds up, you know. So, again, that's why I'm doing internet business, because I have a personal value. Just like a lot of this stuff is my personal values, and there's Bible in it, but take this with a grain of salt. I don't want to do debt. I don't want to get in debt. The only debt I might do, I want to see if I can learn how to make a lot of money first, is a mortgage. And even that I'm reluctant with. I'm like, what if I could live a life without debt? That'd be kind of cool. It just seems like the honest way to do it.
Yep.
My whole life is just an experiment at this point, because otherwise I'd be dead without God's help. So, yeah.
So that balance, you hope to pass that entrepreneurial spirit onto your kids. So you want your kids around as you're growing the business.
At least for
maybe, I mean,
Well, let me just
depend on
tell you
what you're
this.
doing. It may be for in that particular thing. It may be just a little. It might be instead of 5, 6, 7. It might be
I believe
8,
there's
9,
power
10.
in like family blood and family heritage
Yep.
and like names. I have a whole theory behind that. I won't go into it, but basically, in the Johnson line, there's been at least one man in every generation that farmed and ran a business or did something. Right? Some guy moved here. He rented land for a little bit. Then my great grandpa Fred was the first guy to own some land, and then Kenny took it over. My dad took it and just expanded the living heck out of it. And I've watched, and I'm like, I have that Johnson blood, like I can be proud of that. So if I'm not going to farm, I better make something of my life, right? Compared to just working
Because the
somewhere,
Johnson men have a history of excellence.
whatever you call it. Yeah.
Well,
So,
but being graced by God because of their faithfulness and keeping God centered in their life.
yeah.
That's how I look at it from your perspective. Is you see they've gone through the hard times and now they're getting to the point of, hey, we can really make generational wealth a good thing. But it's not being given to you. You're working towards it. Because as right now, farming is not what you
Tell
want to
people
do.
I'm either gonna be a genius, like a business genius, or I'm either just gonna be an idiot that threw away the opportunity. Again, I can always
Yeah, but is farming your passion?
not yet. So
Exactly.
But
At least
what's
not. Yeah.
what's cool about big business ownership is eventually all niches down to the same thing, which is just being a very good manager of managers. So I see it. Let's say again, God redeems everything. I had a rough relationship with my dad for a little while. That's why I didn't want to farm for a while. And I'm just giving that one some time. Let's say God blesses me with a good industry mindset. I could eventually add that to a Johnson portfolio,
Yeah.
right? As dad gets older.
Yeah.
And what's good though is they all had kids young. So my dad probably has he could have another 30, 40 years of kicking in him, So
And we had our kids relatively young. I was 22 and Lonnie was 25, I think, when we had our first one, and then 27 when we had our second. So
yeah. So
no, yeah,
with
I like that. I like that thinking of the balancing and the balancing of work life and having family included, especially because you can make those memories of, man, you remember when Dad back in the day he sat down and he taught me about this, about business. I mean, everything you teach your kids on thinking just absolutely changes their lives for better or for worse.
and like I have big goals, and I'm a dreamer. Like I want to be a man of authority. I want to be a man people can respect. I want to be a man that my kids can look up to and say he knows a lot because I took time to do those things, and that's not easy.
He knows a lot and he's righteous.
Yeah, he's doing the good things. He's doing it for the glory of God. Imagine that example.
Yeah.
So again, that's going to take a lifetime of work, a lifetime of discipline. But again, that's what it takes. But the flip side of not having that is destruction. So
Chaos.
exactly at the earthly and spiritual level. So, and so that was kind of my one last point, and then I gotta go to small group.
Yep.
In DoorDash. So, and just talk for you for a few minutes. So, the one last point I want to have is just basically think about everything leads up to a future where a young guy meets a young girl they have kids, and then that becomes a legacy essentially, right? And you want to have a godly legacy, or the Bible says there's two idols, God and money. You want to have a God legacy or a legacy where you have hedonistic pleasure seeking, whatever, and you destroy everything around you, because exactly, so it's just, that's how I look at it.
For those who don't know why I'm touching my nose, that means on point. It means he's 100% on point. What kind of world do you want to leave for your family?
And I try to always summarize it and tie it back to like Alex Ramazzi always says. I quote him a lot, but he just has good content.
Yeah.
And good books. So I think it's okay to quote certain authorities a lot because they earned it in my mind, right? So he always says, if you can't explain it to a third grader, then you don't actually know what you're talking about. And so I just try, if I was a 17-year-old kid, Like if I was me 2 years ago and could see me now, I would want him to explain it in a way I could understand at my current mindset. So for those of you who just don't know what's going on, it all comes down to, like I was saying earlier, that prayer of God help me, and I want to do things for you. Listen to Holy Ambition by Chip Ingram, and that will be a good start. So,
and if you don't know where to start, pick up a Bible. I recommend an ESV, English Standard Version, and read Matthew, Mark.
Read Matthew through Revelations, one chapter a day. That's what I did when I was saved.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, if you want to get the gist of what the salvation is, but change your life. But anyway, well, Alan, we better say a prayer, and then you better get off to small group, and I got an hour drive home. So
yeah.
So with that, let's bow our head. Dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful for this time. We're grateful, and we are praying that our words of wisdom, and I am just awed at Alan and his thought process and how much you have worked in his life. And I pray that our works are good and people see our growth, and that you grow in them also, Lord. And we pray for those. We pray for the small victories. We pray for the small victories, like we saw earlier on the stream, where a person has cut the amount of sin in their life in half. Still not there, but with your grace, we will absolutely get there. And Lord, we just ask that those people that are lost and need guidance, that this word resonates with them, and they find the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and they can come to understand what it means to live a godly life, and they can share their experiences and further your kingdom, Lord. We ask this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
All right. Two viewers watching, thanks for watching the whole time. You all have a great night, and God bless you. So have a good one.